and it's in public works, recycling, and then curbside recycling, and there's a link on it.
No, for here.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Check that out.
But I've got all the dates set for this year. I'm just waiting for their calendar.
All right, can everyone hear me?
You can rock it.
I'm sorry. Happy New Year.
All right, everybody, let's start this up. If everyone can hear me, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Thursday, January 5th, 2023 at 6:01 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If anyone would like to lead us, please do so.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the honor, sir.
Yep. Order of agenda. We have an executive session listed that we aren't actually going to do tonight. So that's the only change to the order of agenda. So we will get into the public comment. We'll start with people in the room and then we'll talk to those people who are joining us by Zoom. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone. You'll have 5 minutes. Please identify yourself and your town or village of residence. Please direct your comments to the select board as a whole and not individual members, and refrain from any personal attacks. So if there's anyone who would like to come up to the microphone, please do so.
Evening, Tim Ferrier, White Junction. Said a couple things I wanted to go over, and I thought it would be best in person. I tired of Zoom actually. The first item I wanted to bring up was the local option tax. I'm not entirely sure exactly how much revenue that's been generating in town. I'm expecting to hear that, but the premise that I have around that, or the concern I have around that, is that yes, indeed, it generates revenue for the town, but I've noticed in the agenda tonight the consideration of using some of that funding for the cemetery needs, which I think the cemeteries do need needs, but I don't think they should be funded through that source. When the local option tax was voted on by citizens, there was a lot of debate for sure. And
Tim.
I'm usually loud enough. You know, there was a lot of debate about it, and the discussion was certainly around like how is this money to be used. And I think the original intent was that the funding would sort of somewhat be directed to those people that it's being collected from. That is to say, if it's food and lodging, that it would be sort of almost like an impact fee, that it would be that those funds would be sort of specific to growth challenges or what have you. So I just want you to kind of be aware of that, you know, I'm not saying it's necessarily earmarked money, but the reality is if half of it goes to the state, in my calculations, you know, you can move the tax rate by a penny and make up for it. So it's not a significant impact at large. And I just feel like it has a significant impact on the businesses that have to pay it. And again, 50 cents of that dollar goes to Montpelier. It doesn't come to Hartford. So I just think it's a bad fiscal policy to have something like that set up. The other components that I just want to touch on tonight, I'm not expecting answers, are just the economic health of the TIF program right now. I don't know who could get back to me on that, perhaps Lori, that my concern relates to the fact that we have floated a significant number of bonds with the expectation of obviously the tax improvement in the increment. And I'm just kind of curious if there's some type of update on how that's going or doing. I do know some of the original properties that were slated to be part of that are now no longer paying taxes. So I'm not sure how that plays out fiscally. The other two areas that I have concerns around as a citizen are the overall financial health of the transfer station, what the future is of that. And finally, what's going on, or the health of WABA, the Wendell Barwood Arena. I know that, again, long history and discussions around the viability of that in terms of the money coming in and the expense of operating it. I think it's a great facility. I'm glad it's there, but I just was curious as to the overall kind of functionality of that. So that's all for me for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for the comment on the local option tax, and we'll look to get you the information that you requested. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to comment publicly?
Hi, Emily Clough from the West Hartford Library Board. So I was looking through the agenda today and noticed there is a comment on the bottom of the page that says continued strong recommendation for the West Hartford Library to become independent, effective 7/1/24. This is news to us, so it would be great if someone could have a meeting with us and talk to us about what this entails, what the costs are to this. You know, we're a group of volunteers that help manage the board, and we're not really savvy when it comes to making a library independent. So it would be great to have some support in that, what that all looks like. And other things that we'd like, just for thought, credit card for Sandy to have. She's the librarian, because she uses her personal credit card and then gets reimbursed.
I think we're planning to hear from, we're planning to hear on this specific topic of the libraries a little bit later with the appropriations. And
Okay,
so typically the format for general public comment typically relates to things that are not on the agenda.
gotcha.
So sorry to interrupt, but
Is there later chance for public comment?
relating to the libraries, if you have a comment that relates to something other,
All
okay,
library.
then yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That works for me. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Emily. We'll hear from you a little later when we take up the library issue. Anyone else? Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Oh,
Wait,
yes, one
there's
more.
somebody else in the room, Mike.
Okay, ask them to come up, please.
They're working on it.
Hi, Mike. My name's Ken Parker. I live in Hartford Village. I was on the board when we adopted the local option tax. And Tim is not quite correct. The town gets 70% of the tax that's generated by the 1%. The state gets 30%. And I'm not sure what the current numbers are, but recent numbers indicated that the rooms and meals tax collected by the state in the town of Hartford ranged between 38 and below $40 million range. And the 1% would consequently raise about $380,000 to $400,000, of which the town had 70%. So that made the revenue flow to the town approximately $270,000 to $300,000. So it is a significant amount, but I just wanted to make sure that the public understood that we get the bigger portion of the tax that's raised by that tax here in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else before we check on the folks attending by Zoom? I don't see anyone. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
No hands up at the moment.
Okay, given that, we will conclude public comment. And now we'll begin our budget reviews. So I believe Gail's going to take the lead on that one. And I'll just turn it over to her.
You say me, Mike? I'm sorry, Kim was talking to me.
Oh, yeah, Gail, if you want to, if you're going to lead us on the review of the
I am.
budget review, go right ahead.
I am. Thank you so much. Just a couple housekeeping things. Select board members, please remember to turn in your timesheets for the calendar year 2022. There's a few of you that are lagging behind, and we really need to close that out. And the other issue, the other housekeeping thing, the town clerk's office will be closed on Tuesday, January 10th from 10 to noon. They need to complete notary continuing education for license renewal. We certainly apologize for any inconvenience, but we just want to give everybody a heads up in advance.
I didn't mean to laugh. I just got dagger eyes from Lana, so I'm the one lagging behind.
Oh, okay. So if I could share my screen, please. Thank you. Perfect. So this evening, it's all about budgets, and we're going to start out talking about the town manager's budget and all of their divisions, which contains the select board, boards and commissions, the manager, legal, this town hall, tax collection, and county judicial services and debt. I will have a slide at the end for questions, so we can talk about them then. So part of the Town managers division includes the select board, as I said. In 2023, the budget for the select board, the total was 55,742. The proposed for 2024 is 62,276.13, which results in a positive change of 6,500 and some change. Part of the select board division, their compensation represents 66% of it, and the overall other operating expenditures, legal ads, which are 6,500, and then recruitment and training, which is 12,500. I will let everybody know that on next Tuesday, January 10th, we will be having a further discussion regarding recruitment and training for the board. So if you do have questions about that, I ask that you stay tuned until next Tuesday, where it is an agenda item to have a full discussion regarding it. The next section is boards and commissions. To date, we've received requests from HCORI, the tree board, tree warden, and the town meeting committee. Last year, the total was for fiscal year 2023, it was 28,700. Proposed for 2024 is 24,000. So there's a negative change there of 4,700. I will let everybody know that each board and commission was notified by their select board liaison to make the request if they wanted to have funding for 2024. So these are the ones that we have received. The next division is the town manager's office. And in 2023 fiscal year, the total budget was $494,203. What we're proposing in 2024 is $509,513. That's an increase of $15,309. Of this division, 70% of it is made up of personnel costs. The town manager's position is split actually. 70% goes to the general fund and 30% goes to the enterprise funds. For those of you who are new with the enterprise funds consist of the solid waste facility, our 2 water facilities, and our 2 wastewater facilities. It also includes an executive assistant, human resources director, an admin assistant, which is split between the town manager's office and the delinquent tax division. And then we have an environmental sustainability coordinator, which has the same split as the town manager between the general fund and the enterprise funds. This budget also includes some contracted services, which are done annually. Excuse me, parking spaces for the Briggs Triangle, the railroad crossing, which we pay for the state. It is including a peer support. Also the HR system, which we implemented this year. As noted here, the actual cost is $14,400 annually, but we are receiving a one-time annual credit in 2024 for $5,000. One other note, the peer support position, I've been in contact with the current contractor that we have now that's providing that position, providing those services. And that will be a further discussion that we'll be having over the next couple of weeks to make sure that the residents of our community are getting what they need. Legal services is the next section. In 2023, it was budgeted at $50,000. In 2024, we reduced it down to $25,000. The reason for that is specifically the cost for union negotiations have been split out across the departments that have those expenses versus them being in the general legal services fund. Municipal offices, that's the town hall that we have here. In fiscal year 2023, the budget was $80,993. In 24, we're budgeting at 83,347 with a slight increase of $2,354. It's a 3% increase over 2023. The majority of this building consists of the cleaning and the maintenance contracts that go along with the building and the utilities. There's a strong recommendation that we consider building a reserve for this building. As we know, with any asset that the town has, there will be maintenance that will need to be done and repairs that will need to be done over the upcoming years. Tax collection is specifically regarding delinquent taxes. In 2023, the budget was at 28,634. We're forecasting in 2024 for 30,459, which is an increase of $1,825. The majority of the tax collection department has to do with personnel costs, which is 77%. As I noted in the earlier slides, this position is split between the town manager's specific department and this department. The one other item in the tax collection department is for tax sales. The tax sales have been put on hold for the requirement from the state of Vermont with some of the programs that they have in place. So currently that has been put on hold. We believe that that will be lifted before the 2024 budget goes into place. The county judicial services. This is a fee that we pay once a year. We pay it in July. In fiscal year 2023, we budgeted $109,000. In fiscal year 2024, we're budgeting $103,781, which is a negative change of $5,219. I'll be quite honest, this is it's very difficult to budget for. We don't ever know what it's going to be. So what we do is we take a look back, we do a look back period and see what the best guess that we can have for it. As you can see in 2023, we budgeted $109,000 and the actual bill came in at $105,000. We don't receive this notice until June, so it's well after when we do the budget cycle. I did put an attachment in there, which just shows the actual requests that we get from the County of Windsor once a year. So the last division is the debt division, and we had a big change in fiscal year 2022 in how we handle our leases. And because of that, our leases are now treated as though they're long-term debt based on their description of what they are and how it reflects to GASB, which is an accounting standard. Normally what's happened in the past is that our leases have been included in our regular operating budgets for our departments. Because of this change that has happened, we now need to treat them as long-term debt. So in a nutshell, they used to live up in the middle of the budgets, according to each department that we have, and now they're all at the end. Still the same debt amount, it's just living in a different location of where they live in the actual budget itself. And that will complete, excuse me, that's going to conclude the town manager division part of it, and certainly open for questions before we move on to the next part.
Mike?
Yes, go ahead, Lanny.
So I'm confused about something on page 3 of our budget books. On the first narrative you have it broke down as former categories, but yet their categories are listed below as well. And I'm not sure why that's stated like that. The other thing, I guess, that I'm not seeing
Hold on one second.
on page 3 of the budget books, under 10, 121, 101, 0000.
That's to show what they were in the previous years.
Right, well, what I'm saying is this was. It says the narrative for column 4, you have those listed. Formally. But they're all the same codes are down below. And I guess what I'm not seeing is under department head or town manager for each of those positions. So what happened there?
If I'm understanding what you're asking, you want to know why they were individual and now they're rolled up into one.
Well, you've got them both. You've got them rolled up into one, but you've got them listed down below as far as.
Actually, columns 4 and 5 have zeros in them, so there's nothing in those columns.
Right,
And so for those items, the individual items, if you go to the total one, which is under the 10-121-101, that has the total of all of the positions that live in the town manager's office.
right. We've always broke down those in the past for the select board and for the citizens to know what the line item is. So at least on the select board side, I still like it broke down as far as what the individual salaries are for the what you have based for town manager salary, because we don't have a town manager, for HR director and our administrative assistant and our part-time, well, then you have part-time benefits listed here, which I understand we're not going to have anymore. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of what the numbers are for each of these positions.
So the previous administration had made the decision to roll everything up into one GL code. There are other departments that have multiple positions that are rolled up into one GL code. If there are specific questions about individual salaries, you certainly can come and you can see me and I can provide that information.
I understand that, but this is something that the salaries are public knowledge. They're public information. So not just the people sitting in this room and myself, but for the benefit of our citizens at large, it'd be nice to have it in the book to be able to be viewed, because when the budget books come out, there's not going to be anything listed in those columns.
I appreciate that. And I understand what you're saying. If we did that for every single employee every position that we had for the town, this budget book would be over 300 pages long.
I understand that.
Every single individual position.
I understand that,
Each
but
resident has a responsibility. They have the right to come in.
we've taken a step, in my opinion, we've taken a step backwards as far as our transparency, though, by leaving out these things that have been historically within the budget books. They've been historically present in the budget books. And now it seems like we're going backwards as far as our transparency goes by lumping them all into one category. And I don't think that's something that is good for our town.
I understand that. And I hear what you're saying. As I said, it was a decision based on the previous administration that made this decision. If the board as a whole would like to make a vote to have this information broke back out, I certainly can do that.
Well, you no longer have the previous administration. So I think it's a decision that you should be able to make yourself to bring this back. But
Well, I think that that's something for us to think about as a board, how we want to see this presented. I know that that's sort of been something we've been working at, what kind of information is best for everyone. And so I think, we take that point, Lanny. But, this is what we got right now. Are there other questions? And are there other questions from the board members about this section? Dan?
You just muted yourself again, Dan.
Okay, sorry. I think that Gail's done a good job of transitioning us from previous to current, and I think that any individual resident who wants to know this information can certainly weigh in and find out that information. But I also think we need to balance the issues of confidentiality with individual salaries with what's there. So I don't think something we should be throwing out there just randomly. I think that if the board feels differently and the board wants to vote on that, I would encourage that. But I think at this point, I think the way Gail is handling it is sufficient for public knowledge.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments from the board or questions?
Are you done, Lynn?
guess I would push back a little bit on that by saying that when you work for a municipality, you're paid, your salary is paid for by the taxpayers. And the taxpayers have a right to know what the salaries are of the individuals that work for them within the town. And that to me is transparency.
Thanks, Lenny. I mean, they do have the right to know. It's just a question of whether we want it in our budget for, you know, the next time we go through this process. Kim, did you have a question or comment?
Oh, I have a couple questions and I can start with just responding to that as well. I mean, I initially also would have a preference for them to be broken out primarily because, you know, when we do our process and due diligence every year, you know, we're looking at what the percentages of increase for every single line in the budget book. So when I look at that, you know, I basically added up all those positions and it looks like about a 10.5% increase overall for that town manager salaries, which is fine. I mean, so I think my preference is also to have them broken out if the acting town manager and finance director has a preference for whatever reason to keep them lumped together, that's fine as well. And I do have a couple other questions just throughout the rest of the presentation. Can I go ahead with those?
Sure.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, please.
So as the finance director, I don't have a preference one way or the other. As I said, I'm going along. What's presented here is what was put in by the previous administration. I don't have a preference one way or the other. Having that disclosed, what I do have a preference on is individuals as individuals being personally attacked as they were last year during the budget process. If we're going to talk about positions and not actual people's names and drag them through the mud, then I certainly don't have a problem at all. But it's when we start attacking people humanly, that's just not appropriate. If you have a problem with the actual position and what they're performing for services, then that's a bigger discussion. So again, if the board chooses, if they want to vote as a board to break this down, I certainly can do that. Thank you.
Mike? Mike?
She's muted. You're muted.
So what?
Well, hold on. Is Kim done with her questions?
I'm not done with my
Go ahead.
questions, but do you want to stick on this topic?
Yes, with this, well, we're on this section right here right now. So one of the things is we don't have a permanent town manager right now. And we have a salary listing for a permanent town manager. So what are you looking at for payments for a salary for our next town manager? I mean, that's included in here somewhere. And it seems like it'd be a knowledge question that taxpayers and me as a select board member would like to have the number there. And I don't. It's like I see it rolled up within this big number. But as Kim said, without having this, then when we go to hire a next town manager, we may not be able to come within the terms of that number we don't even know. And that's why I have a problem with not having something presented to me that I can see where we're going. And as far as Kim said, tracking trends on spending, especially when it comes to salaries and expenditures, we have no way to do that if we don't have the numbers presented. And that's, I mean, for people like Excel, like myself, it's certainly nice to have a trend to see where we're headed with that. So I just think that's going definitely in the direction taking us away from transparency for the town.
Can I make a motion? Mr. Chair?
You can. I think we need to you can always make a motion. I guess the question is, what does it entail? Do you want these salaries published, you know, next time we want Gail to just go update them and bring them to us? I mean, I guess the question is, what is the motion? And then sure, make a motion and we can vote on it.
Well, maybe we could just see if the board is in favor, generally speaking, of a request for when we do our budget wrap up, if we can be provided those amounts. And then if there's a motion to put them in the final budget book, we could do that. So is there, I mean, do you want a motion for that, or can we just
I think we can get consensus, you know, without a formal motion. So I guess I would just I guess if we can just do like a poll, almost like a roll call and you can say, yes, we want to see
Is
that.
there any
information,
objection?
or no.
Is there any objection to requesting that during our budget wrap up, we get the individual town manager department salaries for the positions listed?
I'm 100% behind it.
Elena's behind it. Kim,
Yeah, no objections from me.
Mary,
I don't have any objections, but I totally see where this has gone. And having been a member of a public school where we also have our salaries out in the open, I think I think something Gail said is a little concerning if we start feeling that we can take individuals out and then start, I don't know, getting to the point where people say things that aren't necessarily true. I went to a town meeting once where we were talking about discussions of salaries, and someone stood up and said the teachers, where I was at Hanover High School, teachers are paid as much as the doctors are at Hitchcock. And it was very deflating because it wasn't true, but it was very difficult to be in there and come to a meeting and feel like, you know, people were against you because of raises that teachers had according to experience and their education, the steps. So I just have mixed emotions, so I can't really, you know, I think for purposes of us trying to figure out percentages of increases, that's fine. But I also agree with Gail that I think sometimes when you separate things out, you do get personal, and I would be uncomfortable with that. So I really kind of am 50-50. I guess I can't say.
Mike, can I speak to that?
Dan had his hand up. I'd like to hear from him first, then we can go back to you, Lanny. Dan, if you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess what I would say is that I acknowledge Gail's professionalism here, and I want to support her in saying that do we do this for other departments? So do we look at the fire department, the rec department, the police department, all the other departments, and say, what do each individual employee make? I'd like to follow that model. So I am very conscientious of tying a salary to a position, especially when there's only one position, because as Gail said, that really gives some potential negativity to that individual. Which I don't like at all. I think if we say the town manager's department has a salaries, including these 3 positions of X, Y, and Z, that's fair. We can all kind of in our heads sort of determine the specifics of how they're broken down. But I don't like the idea of trying to tie a salary to an individual position and then be able to single that person out publicly or privately for what they make. I think we need to be consistent across departments, and if we don't do that for the other departments in the town, I don't think we should do that for the town managers' jobs in that department.
Thank you, Dan. Lanny, you had one more thing, I think.
Yeah, within a town as small as the town of Hartford, it's difficult to talk about individual positions within the town manager's office without the knowledge of who those positions belong to. So yes, individual names shouldn't be mentioned, but when we talk about HR director, administrative assistant, I mean, nobody's stupid in this town, and they know who we're talking about for individuals. It doesn't make sense to try to make orange juice when you only got apples. And we do not have, and never in the past have we broken it down every single individual within the town of Hartford, except I'll take that back. At one point in time, we did publish the individual salaries of every individual in the town of Hartford. And that was true transparency, and we went away from that. And so it seems like every year we go away from transparency to taxpayers. And we're not talking about breaking out every single A, B, C, D, E, F, G firefighter or police officer. We're talking about line items that have been on the budget in the past historically that are slowly disappearing over time. The other thing is that we don't have anything listed on here that says what the select board is doing for cost for training, or what the select board is getting paid. We're getting paid $75 an hour. I have no fear, not an hour, I'm sorry, a meeting, my apologies. I have no fear in saying that we're getting $75 a meeting. All right. And I'm not looking for a raise either, but it's, as I said, when you work for a municipality, there is a certain level of expectation of public scrutiny. And I just like to see us go back to what we were 3 years ago or 4 years ago and have a better breakdown so that we can track trends. And that's the last I'm going to say on the subject.
All right, so it sounds to me like there's consensus to get that information from you, Gail, prior to our final budget meeting. I would also add, if any board member notices something like this that has to do with presentation, things like that, please bring it up to the chair, vice chair, and Gail in advance, so that we can just conduct our meetings efficiently. So Gail, if you can get us that information for the final budget review, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we can probably move on to the next part of the presentation.
Well, I think Kim had more questions.
Oh, did you have more questions, Kim?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
One from the questions I did send in advance, which I guess relates to is this building repair and maintenance in the town managers?
No, they have their own.
The whole building, okay,
Correct.
but was that part of, so there's, because I think the question I had asked was relating to the senior center later, like there's no.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll wait for that one. And when the legal fees reduced because the union negotiation fees, do you know where those went in the other departments?
Each department that had a union, that has a union, was to absorb a portion of it.
But like,
So it should
you know
be in their
where,
contracted services. They don't have a specific line item.
just because when I read that, I couldn't find it like in the HPD department, but I'll look a little closer. And also the communications thing, I think when I originally asked that question, it was back relating to our IT budget meeting, and I put the wrong GL code in. So remember when I asked if there were any encumbered funds for communications contracts? You may not remember because I asked a lot of questions, but basically in the 23 approved budget, in 10-121-318, there was $15,000 under contracted services for communications contractors. And that I don't think ever was utilized, and I don't think was brought forward in any way. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, in the town manager's budget, is there any funds to be used for communications?
In the current budget,
In the
2024 budget,
24.
no, what you see is what there is.
So whether it was encumbered or not, and I mean, we have the number for contracted services overall, but.
Are you asking about a PIO? Is that specifically what you're asking
Well,
about for public information officers?
Right.
Sorry.
I mean, the H. Corey had requested, that it's been part of the strategic plan request all along, was public information officer. Previous town manager said, okay, we're not going to hire a position, but we'll budget $15,000 for contracted communications, thinking that they were going to just contract out for some kind of communication services. I'm almost positive that never happened. And so in thinking about if that approved 23 $15,000 is still out there somewhere, right now H. Corey is expecting to hear back soon from the Tuck School of Business has done this community consulting program where they're making some recommendations on how the town can improve communications, generally speaking. And it's been put forth by HCORI that using those funds that were allocated for contracted communication services might be a way to utilize, which might include something like, contracting with even a PR firm or someone to help once our website is kind of settled a little, like, maybe Ally, can you help me?
No, I think I remember.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't.
And I can go back and find some of the more specific requests around that, if that's helpful, but basically, I do think that, and so I had asked about it in my IT budget, but I think I was conflating the line 121,318 with 121,101, which was not the right line.
Okay.
23,
so-
23, wait a minute, 23,
In the 23, well, the approved budget, it
I'm looking-
doesn't show up in this 24 one because it doesn't have the narrative.
so what page on, you have the 23 you're looking at?
Yeah.
It's number page
Which-
3.
I'm looking at it.
Three,
Yeah.
contracted services. The narrative column 4 is a compensation study for $9,000, a communications contract for $15,000,
Yes,
et cetera, et cetera.
okay,
And the tech consulting group was not, there was no charge for that. They're basically supposed to come back with some recommendations for like incremental things, like how we might fix things start. So I guess I thought that this might be the time to just sort of re-emphasize that request.
So I'm not aware of any contract to date for the fiscal year 23
Yeah, sure,
budget
there's
for the
not.
15,000 for communications. I was not made aware of a request to be included in the 24 budget, so there's nothing in there for that.
And we add it, is there any way to find out if it's been encumbered?
It wouldn't be encumbered because we're already in the 23 budget, so
Okay.
we don't encumber funds right now. You don't encumber funds
Oh,
until
right,
the
okay.
fiscal year
Okay,
ends.
so there's still potential for that.
Correct.
If it doesn't get spent in this year, it could still be spent in. this
That
year.
is correct.
Okay,
So you still have 6 more months
right.
of this year that if the contract wants to be executed according to the purchasing policy.
Yes,
that you
yep,
can-
yep.
That you can utilize that funding.
Okay.
So to answer your question, there's no funding in 2024 for it. I was not aware that there was a request made for it.
I'm confused. Can you just try to break that out a little bit more,
Sure.
exactly what you're looking for here?
Yes. Okay, so part of the strategic plan for equity and inclusion is recommendation for a public information officer, which is a short way to say a communications position. That was requested to the select board and the town manager during last budget cycle, in which the town manager recommended that we just budget $15,000 and just contract out for communication
Okay, so-
services.
Are you saying that appears in the 23 budget though?
Yes.
That's in the 23.
Yeah.
All right,
It's in the narrative.
I see that, okay, communications contractor 15,000, okay,
Yeah.
I got you there. Keep
So that got
going.
approved, the,
Yeah.
the board and the town approved that $15,000 for communications. Nothing was ever used for it. HCORI found the resource of the tech community consulting group, who basically spent some time looking at the ways that the town does communicate or doesn't communicate, and is putting together some recommendations for just like a baseline communications plan for the town. Some of which might cost some money. It won't cost anything through Tuck, but they might make recommendations for ways of communicating that would have expenses attached to it. We don't have that yet. They return on the 11th of January.
In excess of 15,000, you think?
I don't know. No, I mean, they'll probably have layers of recommendations. There will always be opportunity to spend more money on communication if the town feels it's appropriate. I think this is a starting point. But I do think, I mean, I would strongly support putting some communication funds in the 24 budget as well. I mean, there's a lot of people in this room, and I don't know if any of you would agree with me, but I think while we have so many strengths, communication is not one of them. And it's not, it is not for lack of individual, members of the team not being able to communicate. I mean, like, Parks and Rec does a fantastic job. And that's one department. And there's, we've talked before about just even the town website. Again, once it gets back to a baseline of usability, that's a place where any information that the town wants to share goes there, and then any social media or listserv or any outreach leads people back to the website. So people always know if you want to find the information, that is where you find it. And so that whether it's outreach, we're not communicating with 10,000 members of the town, we're providing the information and then we're sharing it as much as we can, but we're always giving people the right place to come back to. It takes someone to navigate that. It can't just be the IT person. It can't, maybe if at some point, I advocate for a full-time, long-term assistant town manager if the new town manager decides that's a good idea, and that person's role may be shared as communication. That might be part of their role.
So just so I understand, you're advocating to add funds without knowing what's going to be presented for the cost of such a position.
Because
And
if we miss this opportunity, which maybe I'm too late, if we miss this opportunity, I mean, it's come up before, it's come up a number of times, but if we miss this opportunity, then we won't have funds until the 25 budget.
I gotta disagree because, with doing this because of the fact that we don't know what it would cost us to start with. And I don't want to, if we're looking at this thing, we're going to go into it seriously, or we're not going to, I don't think we should just go into it half-heartedly. If we're going to go in this, we should fund it the way it needs to be funded and not just, piddly amounts of money to say, well, we're trying to achieve the goal of communications. I would much rather see Tuck come if that's what we're going to have. I'd much rather see them come and present what they're going to present to us and see the dollar amount before I say I'm just going to take $20,000 taxpayers' money and put it towards communication. I just don't think that seems like it's the cart before the horse.
Board members have comments, I'd love to hear it, or if the chair is okay with that. Sorry, I don't mean to usurp.
No, that's okay. I mean, so I guess I have a question for Gail. If we decide or we get a proposal on the amount of funds to add for communications, we still have time to put that in the budget at our final wrap up, right?
You have until January 19th.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, unless someone throws out a number, we have some chance to discuss it. I don't know that right now we're gonna, solve this question of whether to add something. I mean, so, knowing that we can do it by the 19th, if this is something, I don't know if Kim or someone on the board wants to make a concrete proposal that we can take up again, that may be a way to sort of address this.
Yeah, I mean, initial thoughts. I mean, this is something that, it is in the strategic plan, and, 15,000 seems actually pretty minimal for, again, what the scope of work could entail. I would be supportive of earmarking 15 for the moment, just so we have something. And then we're waiting to hear if Tuck Community Consulting, HCOR is waiting to hear if they'd be ready to present something to us. So what I can, do as one of the liaisons is follow up and say, can we hear from them about what their recommendations are before the 19th so that we could have a number. But I mean, this is something that's really important. Communications in town is really important. And I think I'd be supportive of at least considering what, adding in and finding 15,000, what that would look like as we're doing our wrap ups.
And sorry, no, go ahead. Too, but just whatever Tuck comes back with is not necessarily going to be a proposal with a price tag either. They're going to have some conceptual recommendations, and they're not going to say it's going to cost this is what it's going to cost the town. That's a whole nother layer of step. And frankly, it was a ball that was dropped, understandably, because there were a lot of balls in the air, but it's not like this is just coming up now. This has been something that has been proposed as part of the budget and just wasn't implemented with the previous administration. So it's not a brand new thing, but
Yeah, no, so I guess my recommendation would be if it's the majority of the board is interested in adding in communications for fiscal year 24, that you do the research, do what you, find out what you can. We're gonna finalize the budget on the 19th. The only thing that we should be doing on the 19th is looking at any last minute petitions that we get. So preferably, your deadline should be like noon on the 18th. Doing things live and fast is where you make a lot of mistakes. So if you could get that information, if it's, again, the majority of the board wants to do that, then we can certainly add it in there.
So just so I can understand something, the 15,000, if it's not spent this year, it will be encumbered.
If the
Right.
board makes a request, you have to specifically make a request, just like everybody else does.
Right. I'm fine with that 15,000 encumbering that, rolling it into the next year. I'm totally on board with that. But because that's money, it's gonna be out there. But I at this point, I really can't support spending on the money that we don't know what it's gonna cost us. So I will support the 15,000. Just
The
rolling it over.
15,000 that you have in the current budget,
Current-
or 15,000.
15 is the current,
To
no.
this budget.
15,000 the current budget. When it gets to be that point in time, if I'm still here, I will support rolling that over. But I can't support adding more money, not knowing what the cost is going to be for such a thing.
Dan, you have a comment?
I would just say that I would support Ally and Kim's recommendation that we put some money into the next budget, 15,000, 20,000, whatever it is, so we make sure this stays on the radar and we do something about it.
Okay, and so it sounds like
So,
we'll take
Public,
this up.
there's a
Go ahead.
public comment on this topic, and there's a hand up on Zoom.
Okay, so I would say let's go to the person in the room and then we'll hear from the attendee on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe Major, White River Junction. I do have the presentation by Tuck. I will send that to each one of you. I got that today. I will also caution you as far as ever. I hear a lot about the website and going to the website, and the website's not good and things. That the website's not good because the content is not good. There's no one managing it. You can have the best website in the world, but if you have no one managing it, then you have no website. That's one thing. We have individual departments also doing their own press releases and things of that nature. I think we need to centralize that as one base municipality. So those are the types of things that a central information officer can do. We just had a storm. I think Public Works did a tremendous job in getting things done, but I think getting information out to the public, what roads were closed, when were plows going to be coming in a particular area, how could they get out? Those types of things were important. I know that the police department sends out press releases and the like. So I think it's incumbent upon the board to understand that in the absence of information, people make stuff up. So please, 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 I implore you to make sure that we put some money either this year and if you don't put money in for next year, then there will be a gap year of no information, central information organization. So I will send that to you, to each one of you tonight, and then you can do what you may. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I believe Joyce has her hand up. We can try and bring her over. Hello, Joyce.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, there's a couple of just clarifying questions I'd like to ask. One is, if I understood it correctly, that the peer support position that is going to be discussed in the next couple weeks, is that correct? I think that was.
Yes, that's correct, Joyce. I've
Okay.
reached out to the contractor that's providing the service, and I've also reached out to staff who may or may not have interacted with the contractor.
Okay.
And I've posed a few questions to the contractor, and we definitely will need to have some answers before we finalize this budget.
Thank you. That's one of my questions. The other question I have is just under contracted services. I'm not sure what the parking space rent is. I just don't know what that is. I just wondered if somebody could tell me what that is.
Sure. So the town of Hartford leases parking spaces. They pay $400 a month for those parking spaces, if that's the one that you're.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
Yes. It's
Okay.
an agreement. It's an agreement that the town has in place.
Okay. And the other one in that same space, I'm not sure what the railroad crossing rent is. That crossing that goes over to the courthouse is, do we pay for that crossing? Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah, ironically, the state charges us to have a railroad crossing in our town. And it's an agreement that was put in place when the railroad came in, and we're stuck with it.
Okay. Thank you, Gail, and thank
You're
you
welcome.
for the information. I have what I need. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joyce.
There's another public comment, and I do have a couple of quick follow-ups too, but.
Okay, let's hear from the public, and then Kim, you can do your follow-up questions.
So this is just a broad perspective, because I know you guys have a lot of hard work to do, and you can kind of get in the weeds. And Gail, thanks for your presentation. My view is that the thing that would really help the select board a lot is to get some more broad data on other peer towns related to tax rates, debt burden, police expense, fire expense, all the different components of your budget, to kind of give you a broader view to make decisions. Sometimes I feel like these budget processes do get to like line item veto-ish for me, and that you guys would really be better off getting some broad data points that sort of say, how is Hartford doing as a town, at large, as it relates to the tax rate, the delivery of services, and so on, and spend less time worrying about individual line items. Thanks.
Mike, may I comment to that?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so that's a great point, Tim. And so one of the issues that we have is that Hartford is very unique. The Vermont Bond Bank just came and gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago, talking about the size of Hartford and including population, our tax base, the population. So believe it or not, Hartford is very unique. And so when we take a look at what we have to offer for services, it's very difficult even to look at Hanover, Norwich, trying to find a comparable community within the state of Vermont that has comparable tax base. Hartford actually has the most miles for a town in Vermont. So it's very challenging. So I appreciate you saying that. And I just want to reassure you that those are things that we've definitely been looking at on many different levels regarding services and compensation, our tax base. So I appreciate you saying that. I just want to reassure you that those are definitely things that we're taking into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Kim, I believe you had some follow-up questions.
I do. There's also one more member of the public at the microphone.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Hi, this is Sue Buckles from I'm told we live in the Brockway district, and even the town clerk can't tell me what village we're in, but we do live here. And this is more, if it were town meeting, be a point of order. Like, I'm pretty sure that was Joyce who's in the next swimming lane for me at the aquatic center. And I know it was Tim, but if we want to have a good record here, could we have people state their names? Great, thanks.
Thank you. Good point.
Okay, so I have.
A good facility, by the way, that you.
One more follow-up is that back in September, the HCORE chair, when they requested the $2,000 that's been put in for Juneteenth for the budget, they also asked for the following items to be considered for inclusion in the next budget. The community safety review funding support, either ARPA funds or funding in the next fiscal year. Public information officer funding to support outcome of consulting work. Policy consultant to help review policies through an equity lens, and ongoing DEI training for select board and town staff. Would like to request ongoing funds to keep the board staff training up to date. And so when we had the transition and we discussed that HCORE had these requests, I forwarded them to acting town manager and acting assistant town manager and the chair and vice chair in October 26th. And then I think Ally forwarded again the same on October 30th or 31st. So I'm also curious if it would be in the town manager's budget or if there is any other employment training that would be beyond the current existing training that we should, and I have to say, like, so I realized that we had a big transition and we had, originally we were going to be doing the town manager's budget first in that whole process, and then now we're doing it at the end. So I realized I think I had these questions and was putting them out there, and now we're back at it and I'm like, oh, maybe I need to follow up on that. So we got the 2,000 for Juneteenth, which I'm happy about. I hope we will definitely consider something in there for public information officer communication. And then community safety review. We do, I think, currently have some funds that were, that's the one that was left over from the community wellness coordinator. There's some funding there. I don't know if it's going to be enough. So I guess the question is then, and policy consultant, we can wait till we get to a point where I think we won't be ready for that for a while anyway, so I won't push that. But additional training for at least department leadership, maybe?
Right, so all of the items that you just mentioned, I actually have noted for us to have during a budget discussion because there are additional items.
Okay.
Are not put in here.
Okay.
And as far as the overall training goes, the training in general, whether it's for the select board or for it's for the employees, we're going to talk about next week because that's a bigger hamster wheel.
Okay, great.
For lack
I
of
just
better
was suddenly
words.
realizing that.
Because with all of the pieces that have been going on, but as far as the other items regarding each board's request, I have that for during the budget discussion, so we can circle back around and see what the board as a whole would like to add or delete in them. Currently, there are no funds with the exception of the $2,000 for the HFRA that have requested for Juneteenth, and then there is training for the select board currently in there. So I think those two things, but again, the training piece is bigger. And then the rest of the items that they're requesting, I have as a general budget discussion for those plus or minuses.
Awesome.
Does that
Okay,
make sense?
I'm ready to move on now. Sorry to pull this up on that.
Great, thank you. Yep, Gail, if you want to continue with the budget presentation, please do so.
Thank you. Just let me get back to. Okay, so in this particular presentation, we're going to talk about appropriations. I do know that we have representatives from some of the organizations that are here. And I think it's probably best if I do this section. And if you're within that section, that we give you the opportunity to speak, if that is an agreement with the board, or we can wait until the end.
I think that makes sense to hear it as it sort of comes up. So I would agree with you, Gail.
Okay, perfect. So the appropriations covers cemeteries, health inspection, service organizations, Bugbee Senior Center, and libraries. Before I start, there was a question as to why each of these are in these certain categories. The response that I gave is pretty simple. These categories were set up long before me coming here to the town of Hartford. I don't have a preference one way or the other. If the board would like to lump them all into one category under 713, 1000, whatever you want to call it, then that's perfectly fine. But circling back to some of the comments that were made earlier, if you want to be able to track historical information when you have these budget reports, moving them, certainly you wouldn't have that option, but I don't have a preference one way or the other. So the first item that we're going to talk about are cemeteries. The cemeteries that we have include town managed, town owned cemeteries, and not. And so in fiscal year 2023, we had budgeted 22,000. This one is specifically for the Christian Street Cemetery. In 2024, there's budgeted 44,248, which has a change of positive change of 22,248. After looking at this further and doing some more investigation, there is an extra $20,000 in this one that we can reduce it by. So the actual change should only be $2,248. There was double money in that particular project. I can see where the confusion came from because this is only the second year that we've had the cemetery. So it is an error, but at least it's a positive change. So we will be making a change on that particular line to reduce it by 20,000.
So it's 341, which
Yep, I can.
341, 316.
Hold on one second. So excuse me, it's 10, 341, 318, 0100. As you see, there was nothing budgeted in 23 and nothing budgeted in 24. You're looking at your budget book.
Okay, yeah.
And then in 24, it has the 20,000. So that is going to be zeroed out.
Zeroed out.
Correct, because the correct amount that should be in there is on line 10, 341, 318, which has your contracted services.
Right.
And then it also has the salaries, the FICA, and the workman's comp for the individual who's performing services there.
Okay.
Which total the 22,248.
Great. And you're tracking these changes in MiniSmart to come back to us with a final number. I mean, I realize that's not a huge number, but it's still.
I have a whole list of them.
Okay. Good. And you're going to present those at the wrap up?
You will have them at our next meeting on the 17th.
Great.
If not before then.
Okay.
You'll have it. I will send it to you in electronic format. I'm not going to print you a whole new book.
No, I'm not asking that, but just be nice to be with. We had a lot of changes here, so.
I've
Okay.
also been emailing every board member with every change that we've been making. So
We should have them consolidated.
absolutely. Yep. So then the remaining cemeteries that we have for Hartford we're recommending that they be paid from the local option tax. I do know that we have Ken Parker here for the Hartford Cemetery. I'm not sure if we have other individuals from now Olivet, St. Anthony, the Queechee, or the West Hartford. But if we could start with Ken Parker first, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Gil. I'm going to speak primarily for the Hartford Cemetery because that's what I was under the assumption that my presence this evening is requested to do. We seem to be an outlier, and I think that it's appropriate that both the board and the public be brought up to date as to why we are seeking the funds that we are and what we've done with the money that's been appropriated over the last 3 or 4 years. Let me, if I could, I prepared a statement so that I can follow my train of thought as well as give you information that I think is beneficial. Hartford Point Cemetery is commonly referred to as the Hartford Cemetery. It's the town's largest active cemetery, and it's located on Maple Street in White River Junction. The cemetery was established in the late 1700s and has served as a final resting place for several thousand members of the Hartford community and their families over the years. Over the centuries, it has existed in concert with Vermont laws as they apply to independent nonprofit organizations. Vermont laws pertaining to cemeteries underwent extensive changes in the mid-1930s, and among the changes was the elimination of deeds to individual burial plots. We no longer in Vermont allow burial site to be sold by a deed. What somebody is purchasing is a burial right, which is essentially the right to be buried in a specific location in a given cemetery. It also changed was the nature of the ownership of cemeteries. The law formalized those cemeteries not owned by municipalities as duly recognized nonprofit corporations. Hartford Cemetery was incorporated as such on May 28, 1941, and remains in good standing with the state of Vermont to this day. For most of its history, this cemetery was able to sustain operations by reliance upon income generated by an endowment. The principle of the endowment is not available, however, to cover expenses of any form. As the economy has changed in recent decades, interest earned has grown increasingly insufficient to pay for maintenance and repairs of the grounds and operations. For an undetermined period of years, the town of Hartford has contributed funds to the 5 active cemeteries, of which Hartford Cemetery is the largest. Only in the past 4 years has the funding been minimally sufficient to make certain these burial grounds present as dignified, respectful places for our deceased friends, neighbors, and family members to rest eternally. With respects to the Hartford Cemetery, I would submit to you that we have finally reached a level of annual funding that enables us to properly mow, trim, and maintain the facility, eliminate safety concerns, and begin to restore structures that have been damaged over the years and now beg for remediation. A study of all the cemeteries in Hartford done at the behest of the Select Board in 2018 goes into substantial detail in pointing out the needs of all of our cemeteries and the costs associated with maintenance and repairs. If you haven't read the report, I would suggest that you take the time to do it. There's a body of work that was done by cemetery professionals as well as people that have an interest or are involved with the cemeteries in this community. It was a pretty exhaustive study. You've got to remember that prices and costs have changed somewhat since then, but it's a base that I think provides for the progress and the maintenance of the facilities in the future. Much of the report recommendations remain unattended to by our select boards of recent years. The need for appropriate annual funding on a stabilized basis, that's being addressed now, and I think we're finally at a point where all of the cemeteries are getting sufficient money to do what they need to do. One of the critical needs that report addressed, which has not been resolved, and it's increasingly more important and urgent that it be attended to, is the need for a secure, environmentally controlled place where cemetery records for all of the cemeteries can be housed. We have records that are scattered now, and I know you've heard me say this before, but they're at risk. A recent fire in the home of one of our sextons points to the exposure that we have to lose a body of information that's critical to the history of this community. Fortunately, the fire didn't destroy any of the records, but thanks for the prompt response by the fire department, a disaster in that respect was most likely averted. The public has a right to have public access to these documents to our cemetery records. I have the Hartford Cemetery records in the spare bedroom that I use as an office in my home. That's not the place where they should be. They should be where, in this building, I think, where the public can get access to. It's not a good situation to have these in a garage somewhere or stored as they have been over the decades. So we have 16 cemeteries in the town of Hartford. Fortunately, Parks and Rec tends to the 11 that are inactive or ancient cemeteries in the community. they need to be considered as part of what we do with the cemeteries in this community in terms of preserving things. I would say to you that time is of the essence, and the passage of time only increases costs and needs. No doubt you want to know how the funding provided by voters of Hartford has been used in recent years in the Hartford Cemetery. I can assure you that every cent has been and can be accounted for as having been appropriately spent and managed. The largest annual expense is grounds maintenance. For 2022, we spent a total of $36,817.49. Total income for the year, including the appropriation for this last year, was of $74,800. The total income with the sale of burial rights and everything is $76,000. That includes the town's appropriation. We do, at the time a burial right is sold, also have to make a deposit in the perpetual care fund. So some of the revenue that we generated, which is about $3,600 this past year, $2,400 of that went into the perpetual care endowment. Year after year, as I presented to the select board during budget discussions, I've made it known that a portion of each year's appropriation would be set aside to fund the major expense of replacing the roadway in the center level of the cemetery. A proposal to perform that work in this spring has been received and will be acted upon later this winter so that the work can proceed. The cost for that repair is $65,000. We finally have sufficient money in hand to meet that expense. In addition, there are many stones, foundation, monument foundations, and groundwork requiring attention. I've received a proposal for the work that needs to be done to replace foundations, stand stones up that have tipped over, and do some of that maintenance work. And I'll be expending $21,800 to do that work. And that's not the total amount for the cemetery. That's this year's portion of what needs to be spent for monument maintenance. Funds are on hand to do that restoration as well. Two significant concerns require future funding consideration. Phase 2 of road work, specifically the rebuilding of the road from Maple Street up to the middle level of the cemetery, that will need to be done. The road is starting to subside and slide into the gully, and it's at a point where we are going to need to address it. And it's estimated that at some point will probably run somewhere in the vicinity of $50,000 to $75,000. That money's not in hand. I anticipate there will be additional tree removal and trimming work done this next year. Two high wind events significantly damaged towering old trees around the cemetery perimeter, resulting in damage to a neighbor's home, and the potential for serious damage to the other. The cost to perform this type of tree work is staggering, but it must be done for both the safety of people in the cemetery itself, visitors that is, and the neighbors. Nice thing about being in charge of a cemetery is I've got constituents finally that don't complain to me. The cost to perform this work this past year was around $12,000. The year before, we had to do some tree work and spent $26,500. Two trees that came down, they were 90, 100 feet tall. And the estimate to clean them up was $18,000, which just is mind blowing, but that is what it is. As you can imagine from what I present here, cemeteries are expensive to operate and maintain. None of what we've done has been fluff in any way or extravagant. It's just essential in the overall scheme of cemetery management, something that has been sorely minimized or ignored for many years. I thank you for your continuing support of all of our cemeteries in town and for helping us maintain the dignity and respect that the facilities provide for those who are buried there. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. I don't know if I've muddied the water at all. I can tell you that we presently have on hand a balance of $141,000. We had, before we got the first appropriation, about $28,000 in our kitty. And the total of the work that I'm looking at here, having done, is about $90,000 this year. So we're going to be drawing that down, and it'll leave us a little bit of a reserve for another year. So, Kim.
Okay. Mike, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's awkward to jump in when our chair is online. Would you anticipate that after the 24 fiscal year that you would have enough to complete the road work, that the future requests are going to be lower?
I would think so. I mean, the major work that we have to do there is now about to begin. It's basically road work.
And you think that
the cemetery is in pretty good shape otherwise? There's going to be ongoing expense to maintain the stones. We have an unfortunate large volume of clay in the area, so Mother Nature raises and drops stones frequently. I've talked with Lebanon recently, and they have a process underway where they've taken a portion of the cemetery and done portions each year to clean up stones and do maintenance work, and they're spending about $25,000 a year to do that. And that looks like probably what we're going to be looking at spending to do work that's been neglected for decades.
Do you anticipate that it's kind of peaking?
I would think so. Once we get the two road portions taken care of, the rest of the road in the cemetery is in pretty good shape. We're not going to be paving it. We're going to be taking the existing road bed up, digging down a foot, putting some pressure stone and a matting in there, and then putting top dressing of stone on it. It doesn't make sense to pave it. The expense would be substantially greater, multiples of what we're looking at now to do that. So it's not a high volume traffic area like a town road would be. So it doesn't make sense to spend the money to do what we would do with the road otherwise.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Lenny, go ahead.
Yeah, Ken, as you well know, I'm a big supporter of cemeteries. I feel we have an obligation to take care of our cemeteries and take care of the, look after those for perpetual care as well. And with that said, though, I look at the expenditures over the last 3 years of $220,000, not expenditures of appropriations, 220,000.5 is what we've given. And it's hard for me to tell somebody that we're going to give another 80.5K when someone drives into the cemetery and they don't see anything done, don't see any progress other than mowing. And as a taxpayer within the town, it's a hard swallow. And when we look at 65K for road repairs, I want to know who that contractor is, because I think personally I could go down on my tractor and make a week's short work of that and make pretty good money off of that.
Certainly welcome to come and try. The road incidentally is 1,700 feet.
Yeah, I've been down there many times. I think this, I look at Quechee, which is a good sized cemetery. Of course, it's the cemetery I travel to most because I live out there. And I look at their expenditures and I say to myself, geez, how are these good folks out there at Quechee able to do this, knowing they have tree cleanup? And I saw they had good tree cleanup and they have mowing to do. and they have graves to dig just as long as everybody else. I question how they're managing to get through with this amount of money, and how Hartford Cemetery is asking for 80.5K. And if I were, I don't know if you have a board for Hartford Cemetery. I'd like to get a little bit deeper, have you lay that out, all the things you just mentioned, as far as the cost on this, because it just seems like there should be enough in there now to take care of the repairs without asking for 80.5. It's a staggering amount of money considering how much has been given to you guys over the last 3 years. As I said, I support cemeteries. I just have a real tough time with this big number. It's hard. It's a hard swallow for me.
I can understand. It's a difficult proposition to not have a place maintained.
Like I say, we have a lot of Hartford founders and that are in that cemetery. And as I said, I fully support that, but it's hard for me to look at that, the amount of money that's put in there. And when I go up there for, when we do Veterans Day ceremonies up there, and to see just a mowed cemetery, it's tough. And this was not easy for me.
It's 4 times bigger than any of the other cemeteries in town.
I understand that.
Put it into perspective.
Yeah.
There are close to 4,500 people that we can identify.
It'd be interesting for us to see, like you say, you fixed stones, you've taken trees out. I personally would feel a lot better if I could see more of a breakdown and actual cost numbers on this. I'm real hedgy to set 85.
I'll satisfy your curiosity. I'll give that information.
I would like to see that. If you could give it to the finance director, I'd like to see that.
We've got a breakdown of all of the costs.
Like I say, it's a lot of money considering what's been given in the last few years.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but I also understand from my perspective, overseeing the property, the expense that is involved with the maintenance of the place.
I just, when I look at this though, Ken, I say to myself, knowing that sometime in the future, Hartford's going to have a cemetery commissioner, and we're going to have to take on cemeteries. And I just look at how much it's going to cost us with numbers like this that are presented to the town to maintain our cemeteries.
Let me just make sure that's one thing that we understand. There's not a penny that's been paid to anybody for labor associated with the management of the cemetery. It's all been volunteer.
I
So
appreciate that.
if you want to add that cost to the cost to maintain the place and do the things that are there, you'll find that it's pretty expensive to do that. And I think maybe the experience you're having with Christian Street.
I don't know, maybe we could look at, I don't know, maybe we could, I'm sorry. I don't know if we could look at Lebanon and try to do a comparison with Lebanon. So I know they do have a cemetery commissioner over there. And
they also
try
had,
to
had 3 or 4 full-time staff.
Right, but I
share the cemeteries.
To have an understanding of what their budget is and how they take care of cemeteries versus how much we're spending on cemeteries in Hartford. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair, we have a public comment. Sue, is your comment about cemeteries?
Yes.
Mike, could we take a public comment in the room?
Sure. I'm happy to.
Of course, yeah.
If you can.
Sue Buckholz again from somewhere over between Hartford, West Hartford and Queechee. I come from, big city down south where the cemeteries are gorgeous. And that's what I was used to. I come up here and I am ashamed of where my in-laws are laid to rest because nobody appears to be willing to put money into the cemeteries to make them what they should be, to show that we respect people from behind us. Now, my first contact with this was when Lawrence Hudson's boy and Lanny Collins' mother both wheeled their oxygen tanks into my office. because they were the only people working on Queechee. These two old people who can hardly get up the stairs into my office to come and try and figure out how they're going to keep the cemetery going. Nobody's taken any money. Okay. When Jim and I travel, we routinely go to see cemeteries and other places because they give us a historical sense of where we are. I wouldn't ask anybody to do that here, because despite the incredible efforts by these people who have been doing this for years on their own, Ken is basically doing this on his own. Larry and Ann were doing it on their own. So we got an idea to go to all the old families in Queechee and get one person from each of them to get on the commission. Then we did the whole commission. Ken and I got to know each other doing this commission. I feel like no one's even read it. Thank you, Kim. I'm glad to hear that. Because this is a boulder that's going to land on this town. Okay, so nickel and diming Ken about Hartford or any of the other ones is really short-sighted. And I hope that you all read that commission report and get ready, because you're going to have these. You're going to have extra employees where people have been doing this for nothing. And I'd like to hear a little appreciation for them, because I live with one of them. So please, let's get our act together on this.
Thank you, Sue.
I appreciate all, I mean, and you're right, I saw my mother and I saw Larry as far as what they went through. I did, I saw all that, and I appreciate everything that goes into cemeteries. And as I said, Queechee Cemetery is near and dear to me. As you know, my relatives are laid to rest up there. With that said, like I say, maybe it is time for the town to step in and take over and start having the role of cemeteries. And I'm not saying we could do a better job.
Certainly can't do it cheaper.
No, but I'm just, the resources, the ability of the town to have a central place to buy from for all the cemeteries, it might make more sense for us to do this. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. We're gonna end up with it. So we gotta accept it. The fact we're gonna end up with cemeteries. And we need to start doing something about thinking of that now instead of when it happens. But with that said, it's still, do we want to piecemeal cemeteries? Or do we want to make them like they are down in New Jersey and New York?
So if anyone, if
Mike,
no
may I make
one,
a comment?
yeah, but if anyone has any other questions about the budget, let's get to that so we can also, we have plenty to look at. So Gail, go ahead.
I think what might be helpful, Ken, is many of the questions that may be going around is the previous appropriations that have been received that were noted that were supposed to be for road repair. If there's some sort of information that you can provide, so say over the last 3 years, you've been setting aside 20,000 or 30,000 of, in a reserve account, or showing something that you've been setting that money aside that you've been receiving in order to do the work. If I heard you correctly, they're going to start doing it in the spring of this year. So I think maybe part of that would help with a better understanding of the past few years. You've gotten the appropriation. We've heard that some people have not seen a change, their cars are still bottoming out, etc. So I think that might be a good point. And then the other part of it is, I think, and not necessarily at this meeting, because we do have to move on, but the other part of it too is for individuals to understand what the perpetual fund is for and what happens when somebody actually purchases a plot. So I think having a better understanding of exactly the cemetery and what goes along with it.
I can do that. I would just point out to you that no individual year appropriation has been sufficiently large enough to do the road work. That's why I've said when I've stood up here year after year that I'm putting some money aside. And that's how we got to the point of having the sum that I've mentioned to you earlier. It's because we've been careful with our expenses in doing that. So then, but I appreciate your time and interest. I hope I can get some.
Yes, if you want to get that
Sure.
financial information
Yeah.
to me as the board's requested, and I will send that off to them. And I think, again, adding in a couple of those pieces that I just talked about, I think would
Sure.
provide some transparency and maybe some clarification.
Okay, and one final thing. That report shows that to do the work properly in the cemeteries, if you have to pay for it, I think would be about a $215,000 a year expense. So we're getting a bargain for the present time.
Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is the board interested in a quick break or do you want to just keep
Yes.
going?
Yes,
Keep going.
I'm great with that break.
I wouldn't mind like a 5-minute break. So
I
So
support
back-
that.
I like it.
around 7:43-ish. Okay,
That's perfect. They're here for a discussion that we're going to have. So we're ready.
You just missed the fun.
We're ready to start.
Okay, if we're all back and ready, let's resume.
Are you ready, Mike, for me to start?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. So the next one that we're on to is the health inspection, which is 411. This is for our health officers that we have here for the town of Hartford. And in 2023, the annual amount is $5,400, and in 24, it's $5,400. So it's a difference of $7 total.
Outrageous.
I know. I know. There was a question asked, is the health inspection department, do they have other expenses? Should we put something in there for discretionary to cover anything for the public? Certainly, it's an item that I have on the list to bring back up for the board to see if it's something that they would like to have a discussion about. In the past couple of years, when COVID hit, we certainly supported the health officer and any type of means that they needed for public information and mask, hand sanitizer, any type of things that they brought forward that we could support our community. But on, I guess I don't really want to say normal, but on a normal year, there's not any extra expenses that go along with that. But if the board as a whole would like to add something there, I do have that as an item to discuss. as well.
Is this a number that you got from Brett, or is this a number you came up with yourself?
This is a number that we paid him for his stipend.
Considering what he does, I'm just gonna say for this board, this is minuscule for what he does.
You discuss this every year. Yeah, it's not.
It's nowhere
It's a
near.
state position, but it's not a paid state position.
He works for us as a board.
He works for the state. It's come up every year, and every year gets conflated that he's paid by the state, but I think he really isn't.
He's not. The only salary he gets, I believe, is from the town. And this is what is, we all read his, well, maybe we don't all read his reports, but we all see his reports. We see how much time he puts in, and the assistant health inspector puts in. At a minimum, I'd like to see this doubled. 10,000 is, even that's nowhere near enough.
My recommendation would be at the next meeting, if we can have Brett come in and have a discussion. I also know that he's mentioned in the past that he will be sunsetting soon.
We're never gonna find anybody to do this for what he's being paid.
As I recommend that you have Brett come in, have a conversation about the position, maybe a refresher for everybody. And then a closer timeline of the transition that will be happening.
Thank
I'm
you.
all for that.
But again, that's board.
I support that.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, you're gonna have him come in, right? Regardless,
Excuse me?
you were gonna have him come in anyways, right?
No, I was not gonna have him come in.
Oh,
But I can ask him to come in.
definitely.
I can certainly check with his schedule and see what he has available. He may not be available on the 17th, but maybe we can get him in on one of the other meetings that we have. Certainly, just as even under public comment, he would be able to come in and have it speak about his.
That sounds like a good plan. I would suggest we do that, see if he's available. And he can remind us all about the position and everything like that. So, all right, I think we can
Perfect.
move on.
On to the next one. Service organizations, community health. These are all items from entities that have either requested an appropriation, or we know that they will be requesting one. Meaning, I may have sent you an email saying that they've completed a petition. Again, these are all items that will go on the ballot and they'll be voted on by the voters. So this slide is basically information only to let you know what we have so far, what we're expecting. And obviously, all of these do impact the tax rate as they go up or go down, it impacts the tax rate.
Can we stop here a second on this? So I feel personally responsible in a way for the Hartford Community Coalition. I've been told by Emily Lanzoni that it's not my fault, but I feel a sense of obligation to them because I'm the liaison for the committee. And coming off of COVID, there was some misunderstanding and they did not get their paperwork in for appropriations. They had asked for, in the past, 25,000, correct? Yeah.
Are they in this group? I don't think they're in this group. Are you skipping ahead a group? Because
Maybe
I don't think that, you said the Hartford Community.
Hartford Community Coalition. Yeah,
Yeah, that's not on this group. It is in there on one of them.
well, since I'm talking about it, I might as well keep talking. I just, they're an excellent organization. And I know that we have a policy in place for appropriations. But I would like to ask the board for consideration of waiving the policy for Hartford Community Coalition. They do a great deal for the town, for the kids in our community. And I'll leave it at that, but I personally think that our youth in our community is where we need to start to make change. And they're doing a good job of trying to do that. So I'll leave that up to the board. I would be willing to make a motion to do that, but we'll have some more discussion about that.
So Lanny, they still have an opportunity to get a petition together.
Right,
And I
yeah.
understand that you are the liaison for that board commission. However, this is not the first year that they've asked for one. There is historical knowledge that goes along with it. And by setting the precedent that you're going to give them an exception, we have, I can't tell you how many right now of entities who either missed the timeline of their original submission back in November, and they are all going out and getting petitions. I
was not aware that we had that many.
I'm not comfortable with the board making that exception to for this particular, for anybody, because we do have so many. If the board in the future would like to consider changing the current policy that you have in place after this budget cycle and change the framework, change the requirements, then that would be one thing, but it's not appropriate or fair to everybody who has got it in on time. They're out there getting their petitions done. But again, that's a board decision to make. But
I agree.
Who is out there that had not put in their submissions that's still trying to do such?
I've been sending emails to you that have the people that have been getting them, and plus there's 3 or 4 more that we've just gotten, that most recently 2 this week. That
And they are,
I'm not going to say their names.
I just think it's important that we honor the integrity of the process by being consistent. And if we are willing to make exceptions, then I'm open to exceptions, but I think we need really poignant.
as I said,
circumstances to really-
I thought I would bring it out for food for thought. I knew it wouldn't go over very well, but wanted to have a discussion.
Right, I think if you reviewed the presentation and gone through the budget, you will see that I've made notes that ones that we're expecting, or we know that we've already got.
I know she's working very hard at getting signatures.
Then she can, yeah, then they, I mean, I agree with you. They do fantastic work. It sounds like they're already, going through the petition process, and I'm sure we'll get enough signatures and it will be, fine. And I agree that we need to be in integrity with the process.
Great. All right, well, let's focus on what did get in here that we can review, Gail.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next one. This is another appropriation. There's another example, headrest. They haven't asked for anything for this year, but we certainly are expecting that they will ask for one in fiscal year 24. Again, these are appropriations that will be put on the ballot and the voters will have the opportunity to make that decision.
So, question.
Can you ask to be recognized before you speak, please?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So we, at one point in time, we had discussed having these social service organizations come in to do a presentation. I know that's not required for them, but did we ask if they would like to?
Each entity was given the opportunity. Most do not want to come in.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
again, in the policy that we have, it doesn't require them to come
I
in.
know that, that's.
So if there was a request by the board to have them come in, they certainly, I assume, would be here. The majority of the entities that do request an appropriation historically come to the budget and candidate night.
So it's town meeting day.
I've seen them at budget and candidate night. That's where I've met most of them, how I got to know them. The first couple of years that I was here, I got to meet them face to face, was being at the budget and candidate night. And then obviously COVID hit and that changed everything.
Just every year that we just hand out all this money and I have a tough time with all this.
Well,
That's just,
I
I
don't-
have a tough time.
I don't
Doesn't mean
mean
we can't do
to
it, but
banter on it, but again, it is the decision of the voters because they are individual ballot items. You could have somebody come in and ask for $1 million. And if the voters, want to approve that, then that's perfectly fine. We all understand and respect that it obviously affects the tax rate. It goes up and down based on what's given for the appropriations. But for this particular, for certain ones, they're individually voted on for the ballot.
Dan has a question or comment. Dan, please go ahead. I think you just muted yourself, Dan. Dan, you're muted.
Now?
Now you're fine. Yep.
So I just want to make a note that we have a process in place and a procedure for how these nonprofit organizations can get on the ballot, et cetera. And it's not an a la carte assignment as how we apply those rules. So we can't say that you're offended by all these nonprofits asking for money, but we want to make exceptions to those that we're involved in that to bend the rules. So I'm just saying you can't have it both ways. We need to abide by the rules we have in place and follow that procedure.
Thank you, Dan.
I have a point of clarification, if I might.
Yes.
I'm curious, because we're looking at this, like they've requested these amounts, the voters approve it. Are we just could we even make a change to it if we wanted to? No. Okay. Like we couldn't say, you know what, we're gonna take the Public Health Council and take them off this list, like.
The individual entities that have not received a petition to support that amount, you could make a change to those. The ones that have that have a petition because they obtained signatures based on a certain dollar amount.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Lanny.
Yeah, I just want a clarification here. I was never advocating that we piecemeal this out. I brought this before the board for discussion, knowing that the organization that I am a liaison for is a very worthy organization. So to say that I'm trying to piecemeal it out and have it both ways is an incorrect statement, and I don't appreciate that. I realize there is a process in place, but Lord knows we've made changes to process in the past. So as I said, it was something that I brought before the board for discussion, and I'm happy to leave it as it is.
Thank you, Lanny. So Gail, it does seem on like most of these, we're just sort of reviewing what's going to be on the ballot and what so far we haven't gotten like the petitions from, right? So, I mean, it seems like we can kind of go through this
Yeah, we
fairly
certainly
swiftly.
can go through them. It's a matter of just showing how it will, these numbers, how they're going to impact the tax rate.
Yeah.
And what we have now compared to what we're going to have on the 19th when we do our final meeting. If this jumps up, normally we have 224 to 264 annually in appropriations. And clearly, we're not anywhere near that right now. So if we gain, you know, a $200,000 or $300,000 increase in appropriations alone, that's going to impact the tax rate. So this is just a heads up to let you know where we're at. And I do know that we have it a minimum of 3 more coming that will be in excess of $100,000 between the 3 of them, closer to 150. And that's only for 3 that I know of. And I believe that there is potentially at least 5 more that are out there.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to know.
Again, it's really important because as we're reviewing the overall budget and we're getting closer to the budget discussion part of it. So that's kind of where we're at. Next one is low income. For Sevka, they put in their request and that hasn't changed from 23 to 24.
Can I chime in one more time? I do just want to, I don't know if it's for now or for later. I think reorganizing these would be beneficial. Just the way the categories are and the way that they're grouped, like I think that there could be, and I'm happy to put forth recommendation for how they could be grouped, but like the way that they're split up, there's so many that relate to community health, for example. Anyway, I guess I think like the way that these are all grouped together is awkward and uncomfortable for me.
So again, I don't have a preference one way or the other. This is the way that they were organized prior to me coming along. You can stick them all in one, you can separate them out. It's a matter of being able to track the history of it. You know, for the first 3 years of when you're doing your budgets, you're going to have zeros and be able to reference back, similar to what we've done with a few other items formerly in this line item.
Right.
So again, I don't have a preference one way or the other, except I don't want to do it in this budget cycle. I would like to do it in the next budget cycle and have, you know, a further discussion about it. Then we could certainly do that and put some thought into what you want to call it and where you want to put it.
That's perfectly fair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Youth and adult services. So far, Family Place, Windsor County Mentors, Vermont Center Independent Living, WISE, and our Green Mountain Retired Senior Volunteer Program. These are overall general appropriations. These are the ones that we've received so far to date. In 2023, it was 128,550. So far, we've received 21,800. So there's a negative change of 106,000 there. Here's a couple of examples of ones that we know potentially will be coming in.
Great.
The next one that we have is the Bugbee Senior Center. This is not voted on independently as part of the overall town general fund. Mark Bradley is here from the Bugbee Center, which I know that he would like to speak. The budget, the way it stands right now, the budget for 2023 was 150,127, and what's being proposed is 139,212, which is a negative change of 10,915. And Mark, would you like to speak?
Sure. Gosh, it's been a long time since I've run so many young people.
Been a long time since.
Yeah, my name's Mark. I'm the director at Bugbee Senior Center. We're one of the last stops before cemeteries. Well, cemeteries is first, but yeah. So I wanted to just give a little bit of context to how our budget process works, and there was a little bit of a snafu this year, but there's time to fix it. So The relationship between the town of Hartford and Bugbee Senior Center is governed by a memorandum of agreement that's renewed every 3 years with any changes made. So the next one is up in 2025 for fiscal year 2027. So the good news is that makes this pretty easy. Unfortunately, this budget is so. The way that it normally works is that the Council on Aging negotiates with the town manager. That process usually is wrapped up in September or early October, which it was. So, and the budget that I had requested was the same as last year. You're probably aware there was some turnover in staff in October. So I've been running under the assumption that we requested level funding, which is adequate. Unfortunately, this budget is not adequate, and I only became aware of it fairly recently, so I haven't had a chance to connect with Gail about it yet. But I figure since it has according to the agreement, it has to go through the select board anyway. She's either going to agree or disagree with me. But you know, it'll be the two items that are point for discussion. I might as well bring them up now. So the line 318,020 has been cut down to $20,000. So that is actually reimbursement to the senior center for subcontracting janitorial, custodial, and other cleaning services. And when the select board, I think it was, yeah, was it 3 years ago or 2 years ago, requested that like across the board cut of 10 to 15% from all departments. I think 2 years ago, maybe.
I don't think we did that big of a cut, but we did do a slight decrease.
Yeah, so in negotiating with Tracy, we decided that we would lower that amount. So that amount again is reimbursed to the senior center. It becomes part of our operating funds in order to fulfill the requirements in the memorandum of agreement.
What's the number of that? Sorry, Mark.
It's the one, it's 318,200.
10,421.
10,421, 318,200. Yeah. Our ledger account are only 4 digits.
It's on page 51.
Yeah, so since the select board needed, you know, this was like the height of COVID, we were like, you know what, in good faith, we will, you know, absorb this into our operating budget because sanitation is kind of important at a senior center during the global respiratory virus pandemic. But it was under the understanding that this would come back. So, and that's what was proposed last year, and that's what the select board approved. So, and that's the reason why I would like to maintain that for 2023. We actually spent more than that this last year, but are reducing the cleaning schedule a little bit and sort of rearranging things to get a little bit closer to that budget. The other line item is the repairs, maintenance, building and grounds. So Gail is not wrong that not all of that request has been executed. From my understanding, is that this has kind of been used as, oh my God, something really big and major broke, and we need to have a budget line item to fix it. And that hasn't been used, but unfortunately, nothing either has been fixed. So we have, for example, a full oil tank in the basement that's not being used, and that could become kind of hazardous, and me and a few other personnel in the town would like to remove it. That's going to come from this budget. There are things like we need an annual maintenance contract on the heat pumps so they don't start spewing toxic moldy fumes everywhere. That goes into this budget. There's other stuff like the HVAC system that failed. We need to decommission some of those pieces of equipment because they can attract vermin, which is not very good around a kitchen. So I was hoping, and so that's the reason why that my initial proposal that I worked out with Tracy was level funding so that we could keep that there and start chipping away at some of that deferred maintenance because, you know, it needs to get done. So that can involve some discretion. So maybe offline, Gail and I can have a conversation to see if it's feasible to keep that where it is. The only other notes I had, the building heat category, that includes both the projections for oil and gas that Dana and I worked out. So the oil tank is barely being used to provide hot water to two of these things. That's why we're going to decommission it and just put in an electric water heater. And the electricity and gas category is just electricity. So, but I think, Gail, remind me if I'm wrong, or I think you gave me the answer. I was like, can we rename this ledger account? But I think it's a cost pool with us spread out among several different departments. And so
I can take a look at it.
Okay.
Because normally there are segments of the GL that are used townwide. So
okay, yeah,
renaming it specifically for you will affect every department in town.
yeah.
So I can take a look at it and see.
Steve
if
said it was
that's-
important, but not that important. Like, so we can keep that. Dana and I can go back maybe next year and shift it around. But we figured at least this year, because little context there. So now all our heating and cooling is on the heat pumps. So we haven't gone through a full annual seasonal cycle of how that's going to impact the different utility bills. So there's a little bit of guessing in between those two accounts, but it should, it's adequate though. Level funding would be adequate. I'm not sure what I would do with the proposal from the interim town manager.
Question?
Mike, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So I had asked earlier if there were any funds that were encumbered from the repairs and maintenance line item, and was told no. So if they weren't all utilized in prior years, to just go into the unassigned fund
There
balance?
was 4,200 that was encumbered, but it's already been expended. So when I answered your question, there are no encumbered funds, it's because there's no existing encumbered funds.
Okay.
There
Well,
were
I thought we did have encumbered funds for this year that I actually don't have any expended them on.
There are funds that were encumbered from the 22 budget that have been expended. I checked it when she sent her message. There are no encumbered funds for that particular line item that she asked about.
Oh, for that line item.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's not a reserve account for the senior center buildings?
No, there's not.
No, someone spent it. It's right before my time.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, is that,
It was actually spent on the roof.
I thought that was used to roll the dome.
Nope, there was a match that went along with it.
Oh, it's
I mean, do we want to consider a reserve account for the building?
Certainly, it's a town-owned building. I certainly would recommend, just like this building does not have one as well. I think in doing so, I could certainly support doing a reserve for this building versus increasing the maintenance on the building, because a lot of the items that seem to happen with that building could be taken care of if they had a reserve account. Many things that I hear is deferred maintenance, it's this, it's that. In order to get caught up on it, just like we have done with other town facilities that we have, you have to have a reserve and start pecking away at them. So you have your regular operating account, and then you need to have a reserve account to take care of, to get caught up and then start building on it.
Yeah, Gail is absolutely right. And so we're going back to, I guess, I don't even remember the last time I was here, but when we set aside a portion of the ARPA funds for the feasibility report, one of the deliverables of that report is a facility management plan, which will then actually then we'll know how to budget or how much reserve is needed in order to plan out those kinds of capital projects and improvements and decommissions. This year, there are a few projects that I was hoping could get done. If Gail and the select board does not want to earmark that particular line item at 12,770, we probably won't do those, which is a little worrisome, but if we can keep that there, I can go light on it and just pick the highest priority projects. If they're, I don't have any estimates for the oil tank removal. That's something that has been working on, and it just came out recently. Because we had a student group come in to look at our fossil fuel reduction. So yeah, so stuff is in the works, but that I just wanted to give some clarity as to why that line has not been used much in the past. I don't know why there's never been an encumbrance on it. My guess is because without really a formal facilities manager, it's kind of like as things come up, which is partly why I'm trying to make a push to get ahead of that stuff so we can just plan better. So I think it'd be more cost effective for everyone.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's a question for Gail and Mark, I guess, on this. If we were to try to institute a reserve fund, is that something for this building? Is that something we could do this year and put the 6385 that you took out back into that?
Into a reserve fund.
Yeah,
specific
can we
for
do
this
that
building.
this year if we chose to do
Sure, we
so?
can do that. I would
Okay.
support that.
So, okay, so my question then to Mark is, what is the status of the funds that we said we were going to give you, and also the building updates that you were going out to search for?
Sure.
Did you intend to use some of these funds, the 6,385, to help with that 80,000 that we?
Great question. So I'll start with the last question you asked. So this particular line item is meant and budgeted for repairs and maintenance. So it would not be where I would put anything related necessarily to a major capital project. Unless, you know, like the boiler exploded or something.
So you're saying then that you've got this earmarked right now for removing the oil tank, putting in a hot water heater. What are the other expenditures you're looking at for six grand, I guess?
See,
So I'm
it
kinda
ranges
lost on
from
that.
things as small as fixing of some posts that have corroded and lost contact with the ground that are supporting one of the cantilever portions of the roof in front of the kitchen delivery door. I would say probably about a third of the ceiling tiles need to be replaced because they are
Yep,
damaged.
I remember that. Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, this is the account where we chip away at those little projects that sort of come up or that have been put off in the past. So,
I guess I'm not sure how to go about making a motion that we have a reserve fund for this, put $6,385 into that reserve fund.
yeah,
How do
I wonder.
How do I
if
do
you-
that?
Well, I wonder if maybe that might be something that we could discuss and then revisit at the next meeting, because the results from the feasibility report may give some recommendations on how we can manage that fund.
Reduce the cost?
Well, basically, how much do we need and when? So, you know, I'd be happy, I mean, unless you guys want to just put 6 grand into a reserve fund, I'd take it, absolutely.
When do you expect the feasibility report?
Well, so that's the second question. So the RFP, I wrote the RFP in October and November after getting permission from the board to use the funds for that, along with the building an accessible entrance. I turned that over to Gail at the beginning of December. And so she's taking a look at it to make sure it conforms to all of that. So I think, you know, I'm sure Gail is on the list.
So I'm going to revisit my
She has
question.
a lot of lists.
How do we go about, if I wanted to make a reserve fund, or the board want to make a reserve fund, how do we do that?
You would make a decision as a board and make a motion that you would like to. They already have a reserve fund that's set up. It just doesn't have any money in it because it did have one. So if you
Okay.
would like to make an appropriation for a certain amount of money to be deposited into that reserve account for this year, you just make that decision as a board to make that decision. I do caution you that with all the other departments and the other entities that have come forward asking for money, that you've made the decision to discuss them all at once to make sure that you're taking everything into consideration, because the board wants to support everything, and before you get done, you're going to end up supporting, you know, $2 million in something that you weren't planning on because you forgot about the other 5 that you.
So your sole reasoning of taking that 6.3 out of this was the fact that you hadn't seen it expended? Is that, I guess I'm not quite sure why it is that you, how you justify why you took it out of there.
I justify it the
But-
same way that I justify it with every single department that we look at. You take a look at their financial history. And if they have not expended it for the last 5 years or last 3 years, why should the taxpayers keep paying for something that nothing's happening with the money?
But yet I hear that it has been expended. That's why I'm.
It has
hasn't been
not been.
expended
It's
or
not-
recovered. And that's why, the memorandum of agreement requires the town manager to collaborate with White River Council on Aging to set the budget. I would have proposed, the reason that when I did that with Tracy, why we kept it level was knowing that we had these projects coming up, wanted to keep that amount. Anything we didn't spend would just, stay in the pot. So I did not see this budget until recently.
Why is that?
I wasn't asked to look at it. And I must have missed when it was, but I don't know if you remember the old website, trying to find stuff on there. I did go looking for it, but I basically, I was running under the assumption that I had already requested the budget before Tracy left, because we had, that was a quick discussion. It's like level funding. Okay, great. Let's move on to the RFP.
I would say I'm not comfortable supporting a capital, like a reserve fund right now. I think your rationale for past funds not being expended, not being included in the next year's budget makes sense to me. Also with the outstanding $80,000 earmark for an RFP, seems to make sense to just sort of see what that looks like. And because if you have specific need that shows up, then I would be happy to consider that, but in absence of that, it seems.
How do you think we should get the oil tank out of the basement before it becomes a health hazard?
Well, you have unexpended funds this year, right?
Not unencumbered funds from this account, or sorry, not encumbered funds from this account. So,
But my understanding is you have.
for
funds.
the current year budget,
Right.
yeah, we can try to fit it into that.
Well, so why, I mean,
Yeah.
this is an approval for, that would start July of next year. Why would you not do it now if you have funds available?
We can see if it fits in this year's budget.
That would be great.
I think, I don't see any reason why not.
Well, so to me, it makes more sense that you would
Yeah.
deploy funds that we've already taxed the taxpayers for and allocated to you, that are sitting in your budget, that have now been removed from your budget because they haven't been spent. So if you're saying that it's a pressing need, then I
Right.
would be supportive of that happening now.
Right, well, what I'm saying is anything unused in the budget that's not encumbered does not impact taxpayer funding to the town, because it's not spent, so.
That's not an accurate
course it
statement.
does.
So what happens when the general fund, when we put the budget, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Mike. May I speak?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
So what happens, the total budget for the general fund is put on the ballot. And that's what the voters approve. And so regardless if, for this particular line item, you received $12,770 in this fiscal year budget that we're working in right now. That's the amount that the taxpayers are paying tax on. It doesn't make a difference if you only spend
Oh, I see.
$500 of
Okay.
it or all of
Yeah.
it. So they do pay it. And what happens is if you don't spend all of the funding that you have that's in the general fund, it then gets rolled up into the unassigned fund, which can be used at a later date to help reduce the tax burden.
Got it, okay, well, considering that, and thank you, I wasn't aware of that. She's got such a comprehensive knowledge of all this stuff. I don't have a problem either way, because if we have unused funds that we need to encumber for some of the projects that are earmarked, we can do it. The feasibility report is going to provide a lot of guidance on some of these deferred maintenance projects, anything we can't fit, if $6,000 is that much of a big deal for the town, then, or if it's better used in another place, by all means, I can always come back next year. And
Right, I think
try
the
to
part that goes
yeah.
along with that, Mark, is that you're doing the feasibility study by the time that you get it. Believe it or not, in July, in 6 months, we're starting this process all over again for the 25 budget. So that will give you plenty of opportunity to get your feasibility study done, have multiple discussions with the board, come visit the board every meeting and have a conversation with him about what.
I'll be here every meeting.
I won't be here, so I won't be here, so you can certainly come visit them every meeting. But I'm just saying timeline, if try to look at the big picture that we're in 6 months, we're gonna be back here again. You should have your study back by then. You're gonna have all of the information that you're going to need.
Yeah, that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, so I
and the
guess
thing
my-
is, and because some of these projects, you know, they're on the table, but we haven't gotten to them yet, just because there's like 2 of us working on the entire facility. You know, that's fine with me. The line item above that money basically comes from our nonprofit budget that is going to support things like Meals on Wheels and senior programming. So, and I don't see an error in why that funding was increased last year. So that's the only thing I would ask to keep there, so.
Well, so sticking though with this 6,400, I mean, you know, so obviously I'm the only select board member that voted against the $80,000 allocation of ARPA funds for the RFP. So I would love to see that executed in the feasibility study done. But I am curious as to if your rationale for the urgency of the fuel cell that's in the basement needing to be addressed, but you have unexpended funds. Are you saying here that you will be addressing it? I'm still a little bit.
Yeah, I
stuck
just
on
have
that
this
one
one,
view.
I don't have but I think it was like earlier this week, you'll send in the most recent budget update for the present year. I can go back to Dana and talk to him because he's been working on replacing the hot water heater and getting rid of the oil tank if we can, or at least pumping the oil. So I can get back to you, but like I said, this is stuff that was in the works before Tracy left. And
But this, we're not talking, I guess, I'm not asking you about 24, I'm asking you about current budget year.
Yeah.
If you have unexpended funds, you don't know what that costs to take out, but you do have unexpended funds that you can allocate to this.
Correct, yeah,
My
that's
question-
that would go from that.
Sorry if I'm being
Yeah,
unclear. My question mark is really, if you're saying that this is pressing and it's something that you want to include in the 24 budget, but yet you have unexpended funds, that's something that you're actually going to pivot and address now then, right?
Well, okay, so I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
So my concern is that we won't get to it until after July. And then at that point, if we don't have the funds encumbered, then we're kind of SOL and then have less money to work with. But I'm not sure of the scope of what it would take to remove that. If I need to come back and say, okay, well, we have an issue here, I will absolutely do that. If it makes Gail's life easier, or if there's another place that $6,000 could go to, or if it helps, reduce the taxpayer burden, go for it,
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Yeah.
you have the funds now, but you can't execute on it. I don't feel comfortable supporting it for next year either, so. But I'm looking forward to the RFP, the feasibility study, and this all makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, I think we can move on from this one, right? I mean, we'll be coming back to this for a final
Mike, I
review.
think, Mark, you're still asking for the $4,530 in the 421,318,0200.
Yeah, I would like that, because otherwise we have to reduce our cleaning schedule to like once a week, or I don't really know.
And the actual spent into 2022 was 20,000 because that's what was approved.
Yeah,
That's all you have.
there was a few categories where we reduced the budget because the select board had asked for across the board area, and so we agreed we would cover it that year with the understanding it would go back up.
Mhm.
It went back up, select board approved, everything's fine. I asked, I request from Tracy level funding for fiscal year 24. I'm standing here today saying, oh no, that doesn't appear to have gotten through. I would like to put that back so that we can pay my cleaning company.
Well, I guess could we add that line to the list of things to reconsider on our last day too?
Gail, are you able to provide insight as to your line item here?
Why I reduced it?
Yeah,
Having been involved in the 22 budget, I worked with Mark on that budget, and there was a reduction in it. Not being involved in the 23 budget until the very end of it, it was a recommendation that I had given then as well, that it stay at the 20,000. So if it worked well before, again, I understand it's a reimbursement to the senior center for the contracted services part of it, but it's a pretty hard sell when it works. And then all of a sudden you want to go back to it and.
Well, yeah, it worked because we withdrew from our reserve fund that is meant to support our mission, which is programs for seniors and not paying. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lanny.
did the cost of cleaning go up?
yes.
So that would justify wanting more money.
Yeah.
If the cost of cleaning went up, that would justify it by itself.
Yeah, I don't know if you had been to the senior center before about 2020, but it was.
So would that justify the additional cost of what you'd ask for in the cleaning fund?
Yeah, so we switched to 5-day-a-week cleaning with a different cleaning company. The actual rate per service was less, but it was more frequent. The budget cut happened. And I was like, okay, well, we need to keep up on this cleaning to kind of catch up because it had been at once or twice a week for maybe, I don't know, a decade.
So you're getting five cleanings a week from the company?
We were.
How much are you now? Currently, what are you doing?
Now we're doing 3, and that's costing
And this,
about, yeah, so in the
and is
last,
that sustainable?
I think so. It does create a bit of extra burden on staff and volunteers to, do some stuff.
And
would
would this additional money would that maintain that stability, or would it decrease the amount of cleaning?
Well, so I'll put it this way, the memorandum of agreement says that the town will pay for custodial services and supplies. The budget was reduced for that under the understanding that we would cover the difference for that, which is not part of the memorandum of agreement. And that in order for the town to make budget, and then it would be restored back to where it was, and then we would make our cleaning fees go into it. We also talked about in the next memorandum of agreement, why the heck are we doing it this way? Why can't we just treat the cleaning company like the other vendors that the town pays directly, and then we just contract them with them as needed, and then it makes it a whole lot simpler.
That doesn't answer my question of,
yeah,
if we put this money back in,
yeah,
what would that give you?
that would give me more funding to for senior programming. Like basically, the town is supposed to be paying for all of it. The town didn't pay for all of it, so we covered the difference. Last year, the town paid for all of it, or almost all of it.
What are the specific numbers when you're saying all of it? Are these?
Yeah, so if you want to get into that level of detail, we can. The last year it was about $17,500 for custodial services for the year, and then about another $11,000 for our kitchen cleaner, which is a different. That has a lot to do with sanitary standards, and they have to work closely with kitchen staff for food service. So that's why that's separate. So that comes out to what, about $28,000. And we received $20,000 from the town.
I don't know, I see it's 40.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if I'd be supportive of considering and maybe including in the holistic wrap-up discussion, adding back in 4,530 to that contracted services line item, if the majority of the board would be supportive of that. Yeah, that's my take.
I support that.
Yeah, let's put it on for our final wrap up to decide, and then let's move on to the next slides.
Is it library?
Thank you, Mark.
You're on libraries? You're on libraries? No. Cool.
All right, so the next one we have are libraries. 2023, the budget for all of them, 360,219. Fiscal year 24 that we're looking at, budgeting at 384,152, which is an overall increase of 16,993. As you can see here, Hartford, Queechee, Hartford, Queechee, Wilder, West Hartford. You can see what they requested in 2023 for their appropriation, what they have for 2024, and then we actually have the West Hartford Library individuals here that would like to speak. So
Emily Clough from West Hartford Library, one of the board members. So I'm gonna be honest with you, I pulled the agenda up today at 4 and saw this statement. And I'm hoping you can explain what this means, how this works. Do you vote on this? Like,
Sure, no, I can explain it. I'm the one that wrote it.
Okay.
The last meeting that I had with Sandy and Lauren, is it Laura? Laura. We had a discussion about the challenges that between the town and West Hartford Library about what we've been having for several years. And it was a recommendation that was given that the West Hartford Library become independent like the other libraries are that we have. By becoming independent gives you the flexibility. You get the 2 installments a year. You get your money and you run your library. The other libraries don't have to deal with the employment practices, the policies and procedures, and a lot of the challenges, the grants part of it, a lot of the challenges that we've been having since I've been employed here and long before I started, because having the West Hartford Library to have their own board and want to run the library as they want, there are challenges meeting what the town policies and procedures are. So becoming independent is actually a very positive thing for the West Hartford Library. The question was asked during our meeting, is the town going to pay for it? It's not the town's responsibility. We didn't pay and help all of the other libraries become independent. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. It would be so beneficial for the West Hartford Library. I know that everybody there is frustrated trying to keep up with all the procedures and policies that we have with the town. And that's where my recommendation comes from. As far as the purchase card goes, that's been an ongoing question as well. It actually just came up again a little while ago because the West Hartford Library went to actually another town official and was given the same exact answer. Purchase cards, we're not going to give them out. They're designated to employees who the town actually has control over and has policy and procedure. You're in a director position, and the employee that is at the West Hartford Library, we have zero control over the hours that they work, over their pay. There's no control, and that would be a huge liability to give a purchase card to somebody that we don't have control over.
okay, I'll put that in my notes. I don't know that I completely agree with that, but I don't have enough background to argue that at this point.
I'd also note that West Hartford becoming independent, I mean, that's not something that's really before us. I think
That's correct.
just a recommendation.
That's a recommendation, correct. So that's well over a year before the budget process starts for the next one, before the 25 budget goes into place.
Right, but this is not a simple process, becoming an independent entity. There were a lot of factors, from my understanding, there are a lot of factors to consider, because we did meet with some of the other libraries to see if we could understand better what this means for us. Again, none of us are knowledgeable in this area, and how to make a library independent. We're volunteers, as most of us are here. And so we're just kind of doing our best, but to be good.
Do you have questions though, specifically on your funding for this budget that we're talking about?
No, the budget for this fiscal year is fine. I just don't want us to be, to have this recommendation be voted on and approved and being told that it's going into effect in July and not be prepared for it, because there's a lot of issues. Like, how does that work? Will somebody bring it to an agenda? How does this work? Like, do you say to the select board, I want this to be passed?
It would be conversations that we would have. We, meaning administration of the town, not the select board, it would come to them afterwards. It would be discussions that would happen between the management and the library on separating.
Because at this point, we're not comfortable becoming independent because it sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money. And we don't have additional funds anywhere to pay for something like this. Because this is a town-owned building, we have to lease back to you, pay a lease. Is that my understanding? If we were to become independent?
And remember too, this isn't something we're going to vote on
Okay, so.
You know, if this comes up in the future, we would certainly have hearings and meetings about it and want to hear from everyone before we made a decision. But we don't have an actual vote in front of us to do something like that. And so it's just not going to happen. You know.
Okay, well, this,
and-
having it stated here was just a red flag, so we wanted
Sure.
to make sure that we understood.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a point of clarification, please?
Yes.
So Gail, just this, my understanding is this is just a statement because you're here today, that it's an opportunity for us to have it present on mind, but it's not something that's going to be voted on in the budget or included. Is that correct in my understanding?
It is not being voted on in the
Right.
FY24 budget
It was just an opportunity to bring it up as a matter of conversation because we're all present.
because
for
the
it.
discussion needs to be started.
Right, and then as far as becoming independent goes, this would be really the West Hartford Library following suit of the other libraries and registering presumably as a 501c3 that would, like the other libraries and Bugbee, lease the property, operate independently, reduce some of the liability of this employer relationship with the town, and allow for some sort of independent governance without removing the strings of possible funding for the potential.
They would be in the same category as
Okay.
the other libraries, and then it being treated the same way that Bugbee Senior Center is by leasing a building.
Right.
So do you own the building for the other libraries? The buildings
No.
for the other libraries?
No, when you're independent, so the other libraries, we don't.
Right,
The
and
buildings.
that kind of puts us in a little bit of a different.
That's why I was so the appropriation that you'll receive will be twice a year, just like the other libraries get. You would be in a building similar to the Bugbee Senior Center and we pay all of the utilities and the maintenance in there. It's considered to be an appropriation.
Yeah, there's nonetheless, there are many opportunities, for discussion, I think, down the road, if that were to happen about. It's possible that the town would sell the building to the nonprofit, or it's possible that those expenses would be included into a fiscal year budget request to the town or something like that. If you want to email me separately, I'm happy to chat a little
Yeah,
bit
I mean,
further
I'd
about
be
it.
happy to discuss this in a future forum. Tonight's probably not the best one, but again, it showed up, so it was a little bit of a red flag. We're not against it, but we need to understand it better. So we would love to be part of these discussions.
Yep, and you would be if the board takes this up at some point in the future. But as for the budget, I mean, we're looking just at the funding. Do you have any comments on the amount of funding for the West Hartford Library?
No, we're satisfied with the funding. Something to, I guess, to consider. I don't know if that would go in the West Hartford budget or the town budget, but in the recent power outages, as you know, a lot of people were without power. And this library, the community center, was used as a place for people to come and get heat, get water, warm up, get on Wi-Fi. And so we like consideration for a generator as well to keep that when their power's out in that building. At least there's a place for people to go. It's luckily their power was reinstated in the library, but a lot of times people.
Is that reflected in your budget request?
So I don't know if that's something we purchase or the town, because it's a town building. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep. What's up?
So I have a question. How much collaboration is there between the libraries now? That's for you.
You mean when setting budgets?
No, in terms of operating, because
None, they're all independent operated.
okay, because at one point in time, there was a big push to try to have collaboration among libraries. I'm just wondering if that would be a way to help your cost.
But there's not, I mean, I don't think there's really a concern with costs here. It's whether we become independent as a 501c3 or the town continues to manage us in the way that we would manage.
No, I understand that. I mean, and I understand we're not having a discussion about you being independent. But with greater collaboration, would you be able to decrease your operating costs to enable you to have a better approach towards something like that in the future?
Probably not, because we run pretty tight. I mean, we have one employee and she's not even a full-time employee. That's it. Oh, everything else is volunteer based. So I don't know how we could carve that budget any tighter than we have it.
I'm not asking for carve the budget any tighter. I'm just asking
But I mean, we'd have to
for
carve the
greater.
budget to cut. to be able to-
No, what I'm saying is that if you had more, if there were a way to have better collaboration among the libraries. And you could not cut the budget, but cut expenses.
Right, we can't cut expenses. We're already running on their budget. We could possibly run on. I mean, we have one employee, she's part-time. That's the majority of the budget. And then we pay for, interlibrary loan, we pay for phone, trash. Just running the library.
So there's always been the question every year when it comes up about budget for West Hartford Library, because it's a town-owned building. The involvement of Parks and Rec in terms of this, because you guys are involved with like something, isn't there something in Parks and Rec budget for West Hartford Libraries?
No, there's not.
There's not. There used to be though. Was there?
The bill,
The building, yeah, the building. So, okay, so therefore, another complexity, so, okay, we won't go into that. I gotta believe there's a way to make things more through better collaboration with the other libraries. Seems like there'd be a way to.
Well, what would be the best way to get this on a future agenda for me? That would be my question. Because we don't want to discuss.
If you email me, I'd be happy to talk to you offline, get you on the agenda, and I can
Sure.
also.
If
can
this
also
comes
direct
up,
you
we'll
to-
add it to an agenda. Do any board members or public have any comments about the actual amount of funding that's being proposed for the various libraries?
Mr. Chair, I do have a quick question.
About the
Just-
funding?
Yes, so
Okay.
you mentioned the generator, is that included in this budget, or you're asking, okay, so that would be an
No,
additional
I'm
request. elsewhere.
assuming because it's a town
Building,
building, that's the maintenance and heating and all that's paid for by the town. I would have to assume that would be in the town budget, the generator.
It's not at this point.
Yeah.
But that's, so I don't know how, again, I'll email you on that.
why don't you just email me and then we can
Yeah,
offline.
that.
Request to come before the board, actually to the chair, the vice chair. And
No, but I
town manager.
I also can point you in the direction of a program at Vermont Law that can give you some information about what it would look like to be an independent. So just to walk you through the conversation of it.
And then advise me on
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
take these things, show up on
Yeah.
it. That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay,
Look
Thank
forward
you,
to-
Emily.
thank you for this. And just real quick, Gail's great. I know that you're taking on big shoes and I know that you've got a lot going on, so we appreciate it. So thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions on the libraries? About the funding? Nope. Okay, I think we can move on.
Oh, wait, there's a hand up.
Oh, if Joyce, if we can bring Joyce over.
Go ahead, Joyce.
This is Joyce Perkins and I'm from Hartford, Vermont. And my question is, I just would like to know, where can I see the individual budgets for the libraries? What do I request those from the libraries? Because I've asked this question before. And I'm just wondering where I can get those. Also, the same thing with the social service places. Do I request how they give money, what services they give to the town? Do I get that from the individual places?
That's a great question, Joyce. I'm not sure. Obviously, we have requests that come from the libraries and the individual appropriations. I'm not sure if we can provide copies of those to the public. I'm not sure. I'm not comfortable answering that. I think I could probably get the answer for you.
Yeah, that's okay,
Probably
Gail.
most easily. It would probably be easier and quicker if maybe you reached out to the individual, the libraries, I think, or the
Right.
appropriations. I'm not sure. You can circle back around with me. I'm just not comfortable answering that question because I don't know the answer.
That's perfectly okay, Gail. I was just asking because in the past, the libraries have come before the board and they have presented their budgets. with it broken down as to kind of what they did, and they did like an overview, like all your departments did. And I know they haven't done that in several years. So that's why I'm asking. So yes, I will send you an email and just kind of like as a reminder in a week or so and say, hey, remember, this is the question. Do you have answers for me? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Mr. Chair, we have a public comment. If we
Sure.
could take that in the room.
My name is David Izzo. I'm a trustee and the treasurer of the Quechee Libraries. The Quechee Library, I don't know about the other libraries, but we will provide our total budget to anyone who comes in and asks. It's on our website that you can request it, come into the library and we'll give you a copy. One more point I would like, the question came up about collaboration. The libraries do collaborate. Several years ago, Quechee, along with West Hartford and Hartford Library, initiated a project to integrate all of our collections into one system with a statewide system. Anyone in the town can request any book from any of the libraries. The libraries routinely deliver books from our collections to each other's collections and rotate them around as the public asks for them. So there is a considerable amount of working together as far as sharing our collections. Obviously, we're in separate parts of the town. We do have people shuttle books around, often a staff person or even a volunteer will pick up books in one place and drop them off there. So we just wanted to make that. Thank you.
Thank you. So Gail, do we have like a wrap-up discussion on this?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yeah, I certainly do. We have staff that are here as well. And I just have, I don't know if I can get back on and share my screen again. Hold on a second. Okay, so for wrap up part of this, now that we've gone through the town manager budget, the appropriations, we're gone full circle now. So now we need to talk about items that we have that are outstanding. Do we have any new funding requests that have come through? Are there changes and corrections so far that we want to make? And has the board changed? Have you changed the range of the tax rate that you want, knowing now that you've heard all of the budgets? And all of the department heads are either available here in person or they're on Zoom. So if there are any lingering questions before we move into the January 17th meeting that we're going to have, is going to be CIP and a pretty intense meeting of making sure that we have everything wrapped up. So this is, I've heard from all of you, you know, last year you didn't have an opportunity to have discussions about the budget and concerns that you have and have that vetting. This is opportunity number one to have those discussions. You have staff that are available to answer questions. So that's kind of what this format is right now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Lenny.
When are we going to address the ARPA question?
That's a great opportunity. You could talk about it now, but it is set to talk about on the 17th. This is an opportunity. That's a budget discussion. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's important to have well, it's hard to talk about ARPA without having CIP in front of us.
Correct.
So that's important as well. But I was approached about a constituent approached me today, a question about DPW, and since Jeremy's here.
Is it budget related?
Yes, it's budget
Okay.
related. I wouldn't ask it if it wasn't. So was there something in the DPW budget about the Prospect Street light to get that fixed?
Jeremy Delisle, interim public works director for the town of Hartford. Yes, there is $20,000 or $21,000 budgeted specifically for that.
That's great. Thank you. That's all I wanted.
In the 24, right? Yeah.
Other questions?
This is just still outstanding.
Yeah, just.
And some of the things that I've brought up before were thinking about increasing the reserve funds for let me see which line it was, police, 10 to 11,331.
Yep. I have that on the list for,
Okay.
because we currently have it at 50,000 and, or actually,
25.
we talked about going to 50 or 60,000,
Okay.
correct? So that was one of the items to circle back around if it's something that you're still interested in doing.
And then I guess one thing that I haven't really fully put my head around, but when we think about, like we have the police unmarked cruiser fit up. It's coming out of the local option tax. And one of the things that I asked was, is that something we can live without if the voters don't approve it? So one of the things that I hope to have a better picture of is by the 17th, like what, is there something else that could be
Stuck in local option tax, I've not got
that
the
out?
cruiser.
And I think, I mean, not that I trust that, like, you probably put it there because it seemed like the right thing to do, but if anyone has a different idea, that might.
Well, Connie's on. I think we could ask her, can she live without it if the voters say no?
Connie, do you want to answer that?
So I was looking at the budget today, and in doing our plan for our replacement on our cruisers, I just have to look for the next budget for 24, one of the vehicles that I was going to trade in, depending on its condition, I was thinking instead of doing a trade value on it, just buying the cruiser outright and then refitting that as an unmarked vehicle and keep it for the line. So it would save purchasing a separate vehicle altogether.
So are you saying if by chance the voters don't approve it, that you could come up with something different?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. All right, and then I think any of the other ones. Just wait, because when we have those things, yeah. Anyway, I don't have a succinct list other than communications. As well as reserve for this building and the senior center for maintenance repairs. And I mean, and we did have in our email exchange too, talking about the possibility of having a professional Zoom account for the town as opposed to Teams. And one thing that I forgot to mention in that email exchange was that I think Jam is potentially, I think Chico might come to the board at some point to talk about it, but they're considering a new technology that will be kind of an upgrade to what we currently are using as well, that they might request some supplement for, although probably not for this fiscal year, but.
So that would be in addition to the already the appropriation that they're requesting?
I think so. Or I mean, I think it's something that they're planning on doing anyway, but it would be dedicated to the Hartford Municipal Building so that maybe, anyway, that just could be another thing to consider if we do start looking at a professional Zoom account for the town. Probably fairly minor.
So as you work through the budget, are there items that you've heard from all the department heads? Are there any items that you're saying, no, I don't want them? And this is your opportunity to talk about it. Is there anything that you've heard that you would like to have reduced? I think starting there to know if there are items that you want to have removed or have rediscussed. I mean, this is the opportunity. I can't stress it enough that I heard that you didn't have the discussions, last year. So this is it.
Mike,
Anyone?
Mary
Go ahead.
here.
Yep.
I'm still going to go back to my question on the select board, the training, and I'll say again, I know it's a minuscule amount. I was asking that we reduce it by $3,000, which isn't a lot considering we've got substantial amount for this year. And I think because we probably will get select board members every other year, that we could increase the following year, but to take a little bit of a break for good faith. because we all know that people are very concerned about being in a recession this coming year, and I think things are tough. And so I'm just saying we're getting great training. I'm not against the training, but I do think that $3,000 is just it's just a point of concern for me to show that we know that things are going up, and this could be a way of just showing that we have faith that we can cut back a little bit and still not, still serve the people in the training that we do.
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo Mary's statement. I was gonna bring that up, but I'm glad she did first. So the thing that bothers me about the training that we're spending this money for is that there's no measurable outcomes that we're getting from training. And if we're gonna conduct training, we need to spend the money on training that we can measure results from. And although we're getting excellent data, we're not getting what I would see as results-driven training for an impact upon the community. So I'm supporting Mary, and it would actually force us to take a better look at the types of training that we do to see if we can focus it on training that will be objective, targeted training, or that's going to be measurable outcomes. So I totally support what Mary's saying.
So my recommendation would be next Tuesday, each of you bring together what you have for what your expectations are of trainings, whether we have the current ones, what ones that you want to have. That will be your opportunity to talk about what you have in place, what you have for current funds, what you have encumbered funds. And then that should help you determine what you're going to, you may have the flexibility to reduce what you have for 24. Since we do have that for an agenda item next week, I'm hoping that we can talk about anything else. You have no red flags whatsoever in the budget. There's no items that you want to take out or you want to reduce.
Before we answer that question, what is the number though? What is the number we're looking at?
Total.
The total number. That's, if you tell us the total number, we can perhaps start making cuts.
Wow.
But
Your total number, meaning what the tax rate is going to be? Is it a,
please.
Think what the increase is on a $250,000 home. I mean, that's always a good equalizer.
so I can make the changes that we have so far. We know that Scott Hauser had recognized an error in his line, in one of his lines. I talked about the Christian Street. We know that we have some new petitions that have come in. I can bump up the police reserve to do a 50 to a 50 and a 60, and give you the two different numbers on what that would be. Communications, do you want me to add 15,000 in for communications, or do you not want me to add it in? Your HCORI requests, what about those?
I think
Those are,
sorry.
no, so you want to know what it is based on what we have for
Well,
changes right now.
Right, anything that's like definite changes, the baseline, basically. So like this budget as is with the corrections for any errors that were in there. That what's that impact on a $250,000 health tax bill?
Plus all the new appropriations that we have.
Plus all the new appropriations.
Yeah, because the two errors that we have are very minimal. The appropriations are going to be the ones that are going to be that make the biggest impact.
We can start
And then-
picking things away, but I'm not really, without knowing what the number is it fair to start picking away at things?
I mean,
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I could give you that number right now, but I don't believe in doing it on the fly. I think that's where you make errors and make mistakes and trying to do it. I mean,
Is it something you would feel confident in ballparking? We're not even comfortable doing that. Not that we're gonna hold you to it, but just a
well,
ballpark figure.
given, like I said, I mean, given that the appropriations alone, where it says we're like at 22,000, we know it's going to be 200 and something thousand that we have more petitions coming in. So that alone And I know that we've already gotten a couple in, so. Yeah, that plus the two small changes that we had.
Well, obviously, you've been through this entire budget, and this is presented by you. So it's not as if you feel there's places that we can cut. So, I mean, I have to rely on some of your institutional knowledge as the finance director to know what the best practice would be to go forward as far as where we could cut from, while still maintaining the services of the town of Hartford. I mean, to me, I'm first and foremost about infrastructure. Infrastructure comes first, and that's the needs that you have to maintain your needs before we take care of the wants. So to make sure, I would never cut a need within the town. All the wants that are out there, that's where I would think the cuts should be made if we're going to make any of them. But we need certain things to keep this town running. We just can't be taking from that pot.
Right, so right now we're at a 3% increase with the way that the budget was originally presented.
Do you have any idea, and I know that you may not, do you have any idea what the school board's looking at yet?
I don't.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rocket, go ahead.
Just to echo a couple of the select board members, I think Mary makes a good point about the trainings. I would love to see that considered. It is a small amount, but especially that coming from the select board portion, I think that is something that we are directly related to in terms of spending that money. Echoing Lanny, and I think that there might be room for us to be judicious about the way we spend that and budget for that. I think echoing what Lanny is saying, I actually, this being my first budgeting process, I thought the presentations were very thoughtful. I really appreciated the effort that the department heads and also you and your office took to go through with that. We are in sort of I find myself in a position of wanting to give the benefit of the doubt to our town leadership and say, this really does make sense. And honestly, considering how much inflation there was in the past year, a rough 3% net growth in the budget seems reasonable to me. I'm sure, we could go through and argue the cost of paper clips and things like that, but that I personally don't feel that alarmed by anything, by any of the presentations we saw. I guess thinking today, the conversation with Mark and Bugbee, it's sort of, I do wonder if there are cases where there are funds that have not been spent that can be spent. And if not, then I would rather not see that spent. But I think where I'm going to have a much stronger opinion is next week on CIP and ARPA, especially, because I do see that as the possibility of deploying capital that right now is being eaten away by inflation and earning basically no interest in the accounts that they're sitting in, and B, also maybe helping to figure out ways that we can maybe ease potential large expenditure needs, capital improvement needs. Depending, I think DPW would be a great example of that. And that's, I think, where I'm going to have much more of an opinion. As far as the day-to-day operations go, I want to say generally that for me, it felt like it was a very smooth process. And I felt like everyone was very transparent and very accountable to the departments. And I want to thank you and the department heads for the effort that was put into that.
Thank you, Rocket. What do people feel like they need for the 17th? What kind of information?
Mike?
Yeah.
If I may. So one of the things that I think would be beneficial to us is, and you've already said you're going to do CIP, which is great, to discuss the ARPA. One of the other things that I keep harping on this is that we have the opportunity to drive down long-term debt by putting some things by using ARPA funds, not for for long range things, but to pay. I know we can't use it to pay off our debt, our bonds. I realize that, but there's a way that we could allocate some of the money towards things that need to happen for expenditures in the town to allow us to free up funds to pay the bonds down. And I'm not sure how that's done, because I don't have the finance mind to do that. But if you could come back to us and tell us a way we could put the best use for those ARPA funds in order to drive down our long-range debt that we have in terms of bonds. I mean, and also the other thing would be nice to know is, what do we have dropping off for bonds? What's our bond schedule? You know, what's the next bond to drop off? And is there a way to impact our bonds with ARPA somehow?
Is it okay if I talk, Mike?
Yes, go ahead.
So when we talked about ARPA before, I spoke about using ARPA funding for operating.
Right.
And that's not something that I recommend. If you would like to use ARPA to cover capital items, larger items, larger one-time items that would free up money in the general fund to either reduce the tax rate or well, actually, that's all it would do, would be reduce the tax rate, because you can't prepay on bonds.
Yeah.
You're not going to gain anything by doing that. And most of them don't even allow you to prepay on them. But if you would like to make the attempt not to take out more leases or take on more debt to purchase operating things, say, you know, Jeremy needs three new dump trucks, you know, $600,000. Would you rather take the ARPA money and have him buy outright 3 dump trucks for $600,000 versus not, you know, having them in the operating budget? By you asking me to go through the budget and pick out items. Well, no, but that's what you're asking me to do. That it would be like finding, I don't want to say a needle in a haystack, but department heads have written their budget so lean, and because they're doing such a great job with their replacement schedules, it would be a little bit of a challenge. Would I recommend that maybe you all of the projects, the sidewalk projects that we have that need to have grant matching funds, ARPA funds can be used for that now. We know that they're going to be done in the next 2 years. There's money in the budget this year for them. Take all of that out, pay for that. But again, it's picking things out one by one to do it. And what are you going to get the most impact on it? So that would be my recommendation.
I tell you what scares me about ARPA, and this is what scares me. I stay awake at night sometimes thinking about the fact that, are we going to be able to use all those ARPA funds? And or are we going to have projects that are not going to fall within the realm of ARPA? And that's what bothers me. And that's why I say, even if it would be for, you know, for operating expenses to bring down the tax debt, the tax burden, in order to use up those ARPA funds. I just don't want to leave anything sitting on the table. But there's also expenditures like, I know we could probably use another payloader down to solid waste. I mean, that thing's in rough shape, you know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And you could replace items that are actually scheduled to come out of reserves account, but that's not going to reduce your tax burden, because if we were budgeting to take that money out of a reserve account that's already been deposited, there's no relief for your
I understand,
residents.
but it would help us in the long range. It would help us because we have all that money built up in the reserves when we get ready to go down.
Have a little over $2 million. Trust me,
Yes.
you have more than enough projects. When we come back on the 17th, I mean, I can think of 3 things right now that would take the majority of that money. And time wise, knowing that we have to obligate it before December of 24, and we have to expend it before December of 26. If the board if you were to pull the trigger right now on some of these projects, you would have some really happy department heads to start getting these things in motion.
I'm ready to start spending the money.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? All right, this is kind of an answer to your question, Mr. Chair, which is what would be helpful for us on 117. I think it would be great to hear, you know, a list of critical priorities from department heads. I know some of that's already come up in previous conversations. I would also love to hear any opportunities for us to leverage ARPA funds with matching grants. And I know that's something that a lot of department heads, Laura, you've got some in terms of matching grants. And because if there's an opportunity for us to 3x the power of that money, I mean, that seems like an incredible way to earmark that and to leverage the power. Now, obviously, those are not going to necessarily align with the most critical infrastructure needs. So having an understanding of what those are, and then if we can sort of Venn diagram it and find what those opportunities are, where there might be the greatest need, but also the opportunity to leverage. I think that to me makes the most sense for us to.
Correct, and we need to line them up because again,
Right.
if they're multi-year grants, we need to make sure that they are fully completed before the end of December.
Sure,
26th.
yeah. Right, so I guess that would
Great
be
idea.
the next step in the matrix.
Correct.
But yeah, I think that to me is just, would be very helpful just to understand the balance of the need, but also the opportunities.
And I have a question, Mike.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember, my brain's so full, but have the departments, have they ever been asked if they could ask for one thing through ARPA that would qualify, what it would be?
I believe that they have been.
Okay.
And can I answer your question also, Mike?
Yep.
Would you be able to provide us with the summary of the list of things that you have on your notes to bring back to us in that final one before the?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is tomorrow, I'm going to start working on putting it all together, adding the ones that we had today. I'm going to update the software system with the changes that we know that have to be made. I'll update the spreadsheet, the tax spreadsheet, and you should have all of that probably by Monday morning.
But and you'll give us a summary also of the things that you're not adding to that, but that we still need to
That you
decide.
still need to talk about.
That would be amazing. And then, and presuming whatever you use for that calculation,
I'll send you the whole spreadsheet like I did before, and then each of
we
you
see
can-
how much we on the side.
Right, and then you can play around with it, and that'll be your working document. So if you want to add 50 here, 100 there, take 100 away, you'll be able to do it all yourself. And
Great.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Lanny.
Is there a way to start thinking about cemeteries? Town taking over cemeteries?
that's a bigger discussion. I think that we got thrown into the whole Christian Street and cemetery, and there was not a lot of thought put into it, leaving staff in a pretty big lurch. And wasn't really overly fair to the residents as well. So I think if you're going to have that discussion as a board, probably start having it sooner rather than later. But I really recommend that you request staff to give their input versus just saying, guess what, we're taking it over on July 1st, and nobody had any idea what they were doing.
I'm thinking about in terms of like pre-buying equipment needs. And
I have no,
such.
cemeteries is way outside of anything that I would even.
I mean, we're gonna have to face that road at some point in time though. And the more we can start pre-planning for it, the better off we'll be when we get there. So. It's coming.
Any other questions or comments for Gail
Or any of the staff that we have,
or the
either
staff? Yeah.
in person or online.
Did we add a possibility of a reserve fund for engineering for public works?
We had that on the list.
That's on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause that holds us up a lot. That holds us up from new projects. Good thought.
Well, thank
Staff,
you, Gail. Thank you, everybody.
Well, Mike, just before you end, I just wanted to know if there's any staff member that has anything that something that's changed or whatever that they would like to talk about with their budget, since they've been sitting here the entire meeting as well. Lori? Connie, Lisa, Scott? Dylan?
I think it'd be worth thanking the staff for working late tonight. So to be available to us, appreciate that.
Yes, thank you all for coming in either in person or on Zoom.
I think she didn't take it down. Joyce, is your hand still up from before? Do you have another question?
Oh, it went down.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. And thanks for catching that. Okay, well, 17th sounds like it's gonna be a big night, so.
It
let's all-
is, if everybody can look at, well, I'll get you the packets soon, and if you can look at them in advance, We're gonna be doing CIP and plus finalizing the budget with the exception of the petitions that come in on the 19th.
Yep. Great. Okay.
Move to adjourn.
The-
Motion.
Hold on, let me just go
Oh.
through the rest there. So no consent agenda, executive session we are not having tonight, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second the motion.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.